forums tonight, and I'm going to start it off by talking about this notice here. There was a public hearing that was supposed to be happening tonight, proposed amendment to the Land Development Code, the Governmental Center District. It is not on tonight's agenda, so if you've shown up for that, it will not be on tonight's agenda. And if council has any questions about why that happened, Mr. Reynolds is prepared to discuss. Okay, thank you. Our first speaker in open forum is Ms. Barbara Mayo. Welcome, Ms. Mayo.
Thank you, Mr. President, council, and staff. Barbara Mayo, 30111 Windermere Drive, Pensacola 32503. I'm coming before you today because next week is a very important week. I serve on the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Traffic Planning Organization and the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee for the Traffic Planning Organization, and I've been on these committees for close to 8 years. It's volunteer, and we're appointed. Some are appointed by our county or our city council members. Next Wednesday, there's going to be some really key issues to be brought up, and I wanted to humbly ask that we have a quorum there. There has to be a quorum for this. There's a couple of decisions that are going to be made concerning the 3 Mile Bridge. There's going to be talk about what we've been reading about tolls and opinions one way or the other. And so I would just ask that we make sure that all 5 of our representatives from the city are there. There are going to be 5 from Santa Rosa. There are going to be 5 from Escambia County, and the mayor from Gulf Breeze will be there. So the only thing, I know that there's 2 city council people that can't make it, so I'm hoping that the alternates can please show up, because if we don't have a quorum, and the fiscal year ends in June, so we really need the presence of the 2 alternates to fill in, and I would greatly appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mayo. And I'd like to echo that, is that if Ms. Major contacts you and you're able to attend the meeting next week, I would urge you to do so. Thank you. Mr. Byron Kiesler.
Oh, wow.
I won't tell you the rumors I heard about you, but
they're all true. Thank you, Mr. President. Byron Kiesler, 516 West Blount Street. I would like to respond to a recent viewpoint by the city attorney in the Independent News concerning a citizen's right, or lack thereof, to speak at city council and other public meetings. I agreed with many of the points, including that public discourse should indeed remain civil in tone and respectful from either side of the dais, nor do unfounded accusations of malicious or insidious intent have any place in addressing one's grievances. I also agreed that except for open forums, speakers may rightly be expected to remain on topic and not stray to peripheral or irrelevant issues. Although I disagree with the rulings in my own case concerning a citizen's right to speak at public meetings under the Sunshine Law, I respect and abide by the court's ruling. I was, however, surprised that the city attorney failed to note that the Sunshine Law decision in Kiesler v. CMPA does not affect a citizen's First Amendment right to speak in a traditional public forum like the council chamber. What I found particularly troubling in the viewpoint was the implication that members of the public have no right to be more than spectators, quote unquote, under the Constitution. Not only is it contrary to the First Amendment, but the very language is beyond abhorrent to anyone who values his role and obligations as a citizen. I also found grating an undercurrent of antipathy against members of the public who are, after all, sovereign in our system of government. But citizen input should be more than simply tolerated. It can be of value only if it is taken seriously and not just allowed so as to humor the speaker. In much the same way a mother allows a child to help by holding the dustpan. Should there be any doubt by anyone of the substantive and constructive value of citizen input, consider the following. A citizen stood before this body and expressed his concerns about a mounting pension liability a full year before anyone else began viewing it as a problem. Several citizens pointed out to the CMPA at its meeting on December 12, 2008, the disturbing history of defaults, foreclosures, and breaches of contract in the background of the one-time master developer of the Maritime Park. But the board stood mute and passive. Now, years later, after paying more than $2.5 million to that developer, the CMPA finds itself in expensive litigation with the same developer. Having been rebuffed and their comments dismissively rejected, few of those speakers are seen here anymore, and the clear message is that others should follow their example. It is not the law under our Constitution, however, that I be relegated to the role of spectator in my own city and the condescending tone of the viewpoint toward members of the public to whom this government belongs, after all, and who seek only to see it work better offends me greatly. I thank you.
Thank you. And you know, Mr. Kiesler, I'll tell you, I read the viewpoint, and I tried to read it from two different points of view, the point of view that where I sit now and the point of view of when I was sitting out in the audience. And
Yes, sir.
I wasn't really troubled by the tone of either one of us because I've gotten to know Mr. Messer, and I know that he does not feel that way. It may have been a little more academic in his argument, you know, than what it could have been, but I know he certainly supports the First
I'm
Amendment.
not responding to the person. I'm responding to the message, to the words. And with all due respect, you know, any amount of equivocation and sophistry could not reconcile the message there concerning the role of citizens only as spectators with the clear and unambiguous words in the First Amendment. And that's what troubles me most.
Before you take your seat, there's two people that want to address your remarks, Ms. Myers and then Mr. Geralds.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kiesler. I'm glad to see you back, that you're back. And I want to thank you for being a champion of the First Amendment all of these years that I've known you. And for the record, I too have a problem with the viewpoint that was written by the city attorney, especially in his role as the city attorney. I personally take issue with the message, and just looking at it from a perspective of a citizen, I think it sent a message that was not quite accurate. I have been a citizen sitting out there for many more years than I've been sitting on the city council, and I hope I never lose that perspective. I do want you to know, and the public to know, however, that the city council voted unanimously to send a letter to our public officials, our representatives in the Senate, supporting Senate Bill 206, which guarantees the right of citizens to speak at public forums and on at city council meetings. While our city council does allow public forum and comments on issues that come before the council, at this point it's a privilege and not a right, but we do support that right, and we have sent a unanimous voice to our local delegation that we support that right, and we hope that our local delegation will vote in favor of House Bill 206.
As do I. Thank you.
Mr. Geralds.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I can echo some of those remarks in that, Mr. Kiesler, it's nice to see you again.
Thank you.
However, I wanted to point out, not just to you, and you may have already read this and be familiar with it, but I want to make sure that the citizens know and understand as well as members of council. The new charter is very clear on citizen participation at our meetings. And a review of that. You see, recent events of recent days has caused me not only to review the new charter on a frequent basis, but it has come to the point I've been forced to learn it. To learn it. Not only is it clear the level of citizen participation that we allow, at the end of the comments in the new charter, it also states that the citizen gets the last word, period. And that was what we approved when we approved the charter. So you're absolutely correct in that we made adequate and good provisions for citizen participation. As a matter of fact, that was one of our strategic plans, was to improve citizens' interaction and participation in what we're doing. So you're absolutely right. It's good to bring it up. Hopefully everyone will understand, but that portion about the citizen getting the last word, because it's difficult if someone says something and you don't have a right to say anything back. You just have to leave the microphone. But in our charter, it specifically states that the citizens get the last word. Thank you, and thanks again for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Byron. Ms. Hazel Johnson. Welcome, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. Last Thursday night, when we went to the meeting down at Sanders Beach, and they was discussing something down there, but anyway, what puzzled me, the subject come up was about the city had about foreclosure, and I would like for somebody to explain to me fully exactly what you all are talking about.
Are you aware of which meeting she's talking about, Mr. Reynolds?
I am not, Mr. President. Ma'am, what,
At Sanders Beach last Thursday night.
That was the budget hearing. I recall being there as well, but I'm trying to get what we were
if we're talking about the budget hearing, that I was actually leading that discussion. I don't remember anything in regards to foreclosures, ma'am. Certainly nothing
Well, I thought I heard that come up, what city may have the right for foreclosure.
Mr. Townsend, you had your light on.
Thank you. I think what Ms. Johnson is referring to, possibly some of the projected plans regarding empty lots and those kinds of things. And an issue was brought up at some meeting about foreclosures, and that we would, similar to what transpired on West Government Street, where the lien was paid other than going into foreclosure. I think that's what she has reference to.
Well, we certainly, if that's what you're talking about, ma'am, we certainly are in a process of tightening our controls when it comes to the liens that we have in place on buildings. And in the past, the city has not foreclosed on liens. We just brought a test case, if you will, forward about a month ago now, and had that case successfully resolved. But yes, we are moving forward to ensure that that we are addressing liens that are currently outstanding, and that we will begin a foreclosure process on those particular structures in which it's in the best interest of the city to proceed. So if that's what if you're talking about that, then we certainly are doing that.
Okay.
Okay, please don't leave yet. Dr. Wu?
Councilman Townsend just said what I was going to say.
Okay. Mr. Geralds?
Yes, and thank you. In addition to that, now that it's coming back, with the discussion mostly centered around abandoned properties that had sizable fines and liens against them, but we were the references that were made were specifically to abandoned properties. And we had difficulty finding the landlords and as a city, but it also reflects the changes that are coming forth in our code enforcement and how that will operate in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Mr. Sansing?
Gary Sansing, 1517 East Jackson, citizen of this wonderful city. I want to thank Mr. Byron. We'll miss him. I mean, I talk to him briefly once a month. What he's saying is very important. And I do want to thank the council. I went home last week, grabbed a bite to eat 2 weeks ago, and watched the council. So I wanted to rush back here and thank you. I wanted to thank you first off for not, you as a council and the mayor, for not running off the occupation Pensacola. I was told this week by one of them, you know, with 40% of the homes in Florida underwater, some of these people can be out on the streets just like we are. And it's true, 40%, if not more. We don't truly know, and there's no way we can find out. I get around a little bit, and several times this last 10 days, people approach me. How is this new strong mayor system getting along? I have to correct them. It's not a strong mayor. It's separate but equal. I mean, it's difficult even to convince you up there on the council, or staff, or city employees. Everybody doesn't understand it. And it's been, I think, 1 year and 9 months that I keep bringing up. You haven't appointed a staff, an attorney. You know, I've been in many a situation where you watch the Senate, and some of them where I've been present, like you as a council, you as a city council, should be able to turn around and talk to one of your staff people to get information, or go look for information, or get your own attorney to do research for you. You are a separate but equal body, not a strong mayor. That was a marketing program that really worked. And believe me, I know about marketing. They can sell anything. How long has it been? Someone tell me. 1 year, 9 months? And you want to get someone who can do a little bit of research for you? I mean, I can give praise to the city clerk's office, and I think there's 2 members over there. And another thing, I've been preaching for years about the state of the economy. Sam, I left something, I'm sorry, Mr. President. Sorry about that. We all make mistakes. The city attorney, all of us. So I love the way we are tolerant here in this community. So if you write something that's wrong, try and correct it. If you make a mistake over here, correct it. But I left something for you in the city council, left something for the clerks, and I left something for the mayor's office. What it is trying to explain to you what's happened the last, well, since you take away laws and regulations. You got to have laws and regulations, and one thing, a trust of us.
Okay,
Now, I've always tried to trust you and respect you.
Come back for the second bite after the business part of the meeting. Look forward to seeing you then.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Weiss.
Good night.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to clarify, I think Mr. Sansing was talking about an item that he actually gave something in print material to the clerk and you as well, and
I'm
I
sure
think
they'll
he had
keep
intended that it go to all of council, so if we
Yes.
can track that down and
Okay.
just have it scanned and
You will
emailed
have
would be great.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, you have the minutes that were sent to you ahead of time. What's your pleasure?
Do you have,
Motion and a second. Please vote.
We need a second, Mr. President.
Oh,
Second.
yes.
You got another card.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and vote, and then I'll call up Mr. King.
Okay.
Ms. Myers?
Are we voting?
Yes.
Oh.
Passes unanimously, and Mr. Spencer is absent tonight. Reverend Hugh King, I'm sorry that the card oversight. It's one of those mistakes that Mr. Sansing was talking about.
Thank you,
Reverend.
Council President and ladies and gentlemen, council members. It was ironic that I sat in this chamber a while back when you were honoring one of the Tuskegee Airmen, and they said that their motto was "Get it right the first time." And then ironic also Mr. Sansing's comments, but I want to just hasten to say that from its inception, the Maritime Park, a beautiful idea, a great rendering, and consistently it has been diluted and marred by bad decisions, things that weren't right the first time. And we clearly acknowledge that even from the selection of the master developer. Some questions could even be raised about the relationship with council and CMPA board in terms of voting and how those things work. But I just want to point out, and actually what I'm getting at, I want to ask you to maybe table or consider tabling or not vote on this resolution, the recommendation of Resolution 06-12. Number one, I think most of you know that all of the public entertainment recreation venues, the Civic Center, the rationale for doing away with the municipal auditorium, Singer Theater, for the most part, you know, it's supplemented. For the most part, they've always been subsidized by tax dollars. The mere fact that the city submitted the bid, and is now you're going to be voting to approve them being awarded a bid for the management, especially of the amphitheater. I just think it's so inconsistent with what we already know has not worked well for us. The other thing, just the current rationale or reasoning, and one of the promises of the Maritime Park development would be a greater participation by the private sector. Of course, public dollars were used for its development, but now we see that the trend is turning toward public dollars, tax dollars being used again for its management and maintenance, and I think that's a great inconsistency and really a disservice to taxpayers who are paying for the service rendered, and also to taxpayers who are also business people who could be earning incomes, especially from the maintenance and the management of the entertainment venues, specifically the amphitheater. And finally, there was this notion of more inclusion with some respect to diversity. I think Councilman Gerald alludes to it from time to time. Most people remain silent on it, but there is a great disparity in the diversity of public events. Especially in our facilities like the Civic Center, the Municipal Auditorium, even though it's not there anymore, it's really not fair. And how could you expect to get anything better, make any improvement, or even be consistent with promises made for more diversity, more inclusion, especially by the private sector and small business development, if you were to approve this tonight? I would just ask that you'll consider it being rediscussed. I think the Maritime Park Board, like I say, its makeup, because there are a couple of council members on the board, so it's sort of like a double whammy just at the appearance of it, and that might be something that needs to be explained better. But I think you do yourself a great service, and the citizens a great service, to give it further consideration for your vote.
Well, thank you, Reverend. Ms. Myers has her light on, and I'd urge you to stick around until that resolution's
Sure.
discussed, so.
Well, I wish I could, but I had to take advantage of this opportunity. It's something I'm pretty familiar with, feel strongly about, but I have another commitment. Young man's being married tonight and has asked me to attend their ceremony.
Well, if you can stick around just for a moment, Ms. Myers wants to say something.
It's good to see you, Reverend King.
Good to see you.
And I definitely will take everything you have said tonight into consideration. I think this is a very serious move on the part of the city and the CMPA, and you have raised some very valid concerns. And I just want you to know that I am taking those concerns into consideration tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Reynolds is going to be doing a presentation to the Girl Scouts, but I've asked him if he would just stay in his seat and read the proclamation. He's been through knee surgery this week and still showed up to the meeting tonight. And so I'd like to ask Ms. Pat Madison, Director of Troop Pathway, Gretchen Erickson, Council President, and Girl Scouts from Troop 424, Ms. Catherine Iverson and Ms. Kalia Boyd, to come forward and receive the proclamation celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Girl Scouts.
Proclamation. Whereas March 12th, 2012 marks the 100th anniversary of the Girl Scouts of the United States of America, founded by Juliet Daisy Gordon Low in 1912 in Savannah, Georgia, and whereas throughout its distinguished history, Girl Scouting has inspired millions of girls and women with courage, confidence, and character who act to make the world a better place, and whereas the award-winning Girl Scout Leadership Program helps girls discover themselves and their values, connect with others, and take action to develop the skills, lessons, and qualities of character essential for future leadership, and whereas core programs around science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM, environmental stewardship, healthy living, financial literacy, and global citizenship help girls develop a sound foundation in leadership, and whereas today more than 50 million American women are Girl Scout alumni, 3.3 million girls and adult volunteers are active members, and Girl Scouts is the largest member of the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, a global movement comprised of more than 10 million girls in 145 counties worldwide. Now, therefore, I, Ashton J. Hayward, Mayor of the City of Pensacola, do hereby recognize and commend the Girl Scouts of the United States of America for their 100 years of leadership and expertise as the voice for and of girls, and urge the citizens of Pensacola to join with me in expressing appreciation to each Girl Scout and the Girl Scout leaders, and applaud the commitment Girl Scouting has made to support the leadership development of America's girls as they celebrate 2012 as the Year of the Girl. In witness hereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the City of Pensacola to be affixed this 8th day of March 2012. Ashton J. Hayward III, Mayor. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Will do, absolutely.
Thank you very much. We have one other presentation on the pension plan. It's going to be presented by Mr. David Penzone.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. Penzone, as you will remember, has previously made a presentation to the City Council. This is a follow-on to that presentation after we went back and had some actuaries take a look at some numbers. But as you will recall, Mr. Penzone was the chair of the Mayor's Pension Advisory Committee. Mr. Penzone.
Thank you, and President Hall, members of council, thanks for having me here tonight, and staff. I do have a presentation. I want to sort of pick up where we left off on the matter of pensions. I'd like to start the presentation with a brief video with Warren Buffett talking about his views on pensions.
It's the same problem you have with state municipalities on pensions. It was so easy. It was easy for General Motors back in the 60s to promise pensions and health benefits that later, brought the company to bankruptcy. And it was easy for state municipalities, when they were negotiating contracts 20 or 30 years ago to put in cost of living adjustments and retirement after 20 years and back-end loading up in terms of the last few years of employment and all of those things. And those promises come due so much later, long after the politicians left office, that it's a tremendous problem. But the future does arrive. And when the future arrives and you've made a lot of promises, you're either going to break the promises, you're going to raise taxes dramatically, or you're going to inflate. And basically, I think...
So wait a second. Are you on the side of some of the Republican governors right now who are saying we can't afford to keep up with the promises we've made? We certainly can't continue these promises down the road. And in some cases, as in the case of Scott Walker, saying we need to get rid of collective bargaining as a result.
Well, I think... I don't want to, I'm not going to say about the collective bargaining. I do think that many states and municipalities, including Omaha, we just have made promises on benefits that really can't be fulfilled if you continue to keep making them. I think listen, I would identify with the municipal employee who said, look, you made the deal with me. I mean, I came to work here because you said I was going to get this. So, but the one thing I think you do is you quit making new promises. I mean, you may be able to fulfill the ones that you got up to this point, but you say, look, this is going to bust us, and I'm going to make no more new promises, and that's a tough thing for a politician to say.
What about asking?
If the public employees at the state and local levels are installing the people that give them the benefits through collective bargaining, maybe that's something you need to change.
Well, yeah, but you could say every constituency sort of votes its own interests. I mean, you've got people, you've got the rich capitalists who are trying to keep down the
but those companies can go bankrupt. I mean, the private unions are negotiating with, if they get too much, they know that they won't have a job anymore. The others are negotiating, or they're aligned against the taxpayers. The states and the local municipalities can never go bankrupt, so that's why there's no reason for them to mitigate their demands, right?
Well, people are going to make the best deal they can. I mean, when you go off to negotiate your next contract, you'll try and make the best deal you can. But you've got to have people on both sides, and hopefully you've got people on both sides that are mathematically intelligent. And of course, the big problem, with pensions, with post-retirement medical care and all of that is that the guy that makes the promise is not the guy that has to make the payment.
You saw Welch yesterday, Warren, brought up, and it was in the Journal too, brought up a speech given by Governor Corzine in 2006 to the public unions that said, we are going to fight for a better set of benefits for you. He was the guy giving the benefits to the public union. How do you negotiate with someone who's giving a speech saying we're going to give you bigger union, and he knows that might help him get elected the next time, having the public unions on his side?
Yeah, well, I haven't read that speech, but if it says what you said, it was a mistake. It was a big mistake. Not only that, but they use unrealistic assumptions even in determining how much they had to put in the pension funds to meet the obligations. I mean, the pension fund assumptions of most municipalities, in my view, are nuts. But there's no incentive to change them. I mean, it's much easier to get a friendly actuary than it is to face, an unhappy public.
Well, so who's right? Because this has gotten to be such a huge debate, and you have two sides that are painting two very different pictures and using two very different sets of numbers to say how bad of a situation different municipalities, different states are in at this point. Who do we believe? Is there a set of numbers that tells the absolute truth?
Well, I've seen some pretty good numbers on that, but I would say that when they have pension assumptions that assuming they're going to earn 8% or something like that, when bonds are yielding what they are now, that's crazy.
I told somebody that who deals with pension funds a couple of weeks ago, and they said, well, you're just wrong, because if you look at where things could go over the next 10 years, you're just wrong.
Yeah.
What's a safe assumption for pension returns?
Well, we're required with our utilities to use certain pension assumptions I don't want to use, but we've used about as low as anyone. But I think this, I think it's nonsense, for example, when the company has subsidiaries in Europe and then they have them here and they have an assumption for their pension fund in Europe, it says we're going to earn 4% over there and we're going to earn 8% in the United States. I would say let's give the money to the United States. The pension fund accounting has been terrible over the years. And many managements, I don't think, understand it very well themselves, and many, since prefer not to understand it. They care about their own pension too. We could use a real overhaul of pension assumptions in this country. There's been some of that, but I've been writing about it for years. So nobody's really got an incentive to do it. That's one of the problems.
But it sounds like you do have some sympathies with some of the Republican governors who
Well,
are
I
trying
have
to
sympathy for anybody that's trying to deal financially today with a whole bunch of promises made by somebody years ago. But I also have sympathy for the guys that said, listen, I took the job because of those promises.
Right, and 40 years later, these are the promises that were made.
Yeah.
What about the idea of asking state employees to pay 20, 30, 40% of their health care costs from here on out?
Yeah, well, some of them, actually, there's more contributory payments into pension funds in the public arena than in the private arena. If you look at the old...
I mean, in healthcare,
Yeah, well,
institutions, is a lot. That's where some of the sticking points are.
That's changing the promise, and it's very tough, but I think we have done that in some of our private plans at Berkshire, and I think that but when you're doing it, you're breaking a promise. I mean, people work for 30 years in an auto plant or something of the sort, and they said you're going to have your health care taken care of when you're out of here, and then if you say you're going to pay 30% of it, that is changing the game somewhat. I think absolutely they ought to change the game from this point forward. I mean, in terms of hires they're making, and if somebody wants to leave the public sector because now they're not going to get benefits from this point forward, because fine, let them do it. But every year that ticks away on this stuff, the obligation gets larger.
And Warren, just on that, I wonder, I mean, the problems we're talking about are so huge, so structural, right, so intractable. How do you reconcile them with the optimism in your letter and the notion that America's best days are ahead? Because a lot of the people who read the letter and are skeptical of markets, skeptical of government, say the points you're making prove that we may not actually be able to win this time.
Oh, we'll win. I mean, bear in mind this. You can make promises about what will happen in 2020 to somebody, but we can't eat the food that's going to be produced in 2020. We can't use the cars. As long as the economy grows, we will have a larger pie. The problem is we've promised so much of that pie away to different people, but as long as the pie grows, overall, the country will do well. We'll have enormous tension between various classes of people. But if you go back to when I was born in 1930, just look at what you could have predicted. You could have predicted, that stocks would go down from the moment I was born. They'd go down another 75%. You could predict 25% unemployment. You could predict a surprise attack, that looked like we were going to lose a war in 1941. All of these things happened. What happened in 1941? You had an economy that had been kind of moribund through the 40s. Through the 30s, and everybody went back to work, and we were turning out battleships, we were turning out planes. This country has enormous potential, and we will be turning out more goods and services per capita 5 or 10 years from now than we are now. The problem is whether we've overpromised those to too many parties. The pie will get bigger, and that is a huge advantage over time, and it just means that the members of the family fight over who gets how much of the pie, and maybe part of that pie has been overpromised to people. But the pie getting larger solves a lot of things, and it's solved things for a couple hundred years in this country, and it will continue to do so.
Okay, well, pretty interesting comments from a person who I think most people have a high regard for in terms of his, investment savvy. So let me sort of set the table for where we've been and where we're going. As Bill said, I was the chairman of the Mayor's Pension Advisory Committee. We basically evaluated all of the defined benefit plans in the city of Pensacola. There's basically three plans, as you know: general employees. We didn't include FRS, those general employees who are under FRS outside of the scope of this, the police plan, and the firefighters plan. As you know, each group participates in a defined benefit plan where the city makes a promise to pay a certain benefit for the employee's life and survivor's life. And also, the city also has defined contribution plans whereby employees are permitted to make a contribution which the city will match. Also, each of the groups participates in the deferred retirement option plan, which is DROP. Basically, as you know how DROP works is, an employee, once they become eligible for retirement, can choose to retire, stop accruing any additional retirement benefits, and actually then begin to collect their retirement earnings while continuing to work for the city for the next up to 60 months. So they're earning their retirement, the retirement benefits are being paid to them, and will be paid out to them as a lump sum at the end of the 5-year period of time. So basically what we did is we assessed the financial status of each of the plans. We identified cost savings alternatives that the city might want to consider, and we recommended next steps. So the next steps that we recommended basically were several. First of all, we suggested to the police and fire plans that they needed to conduct an updated experience study. An experience study is basically where the prior history, the actual operations of the plan participants is re-examined to test whether or not the assumptions that are being used in the actuarial report are accurate. The police plan had not been updated since 2002, and the fire plan had not been updated since 2005. So step number one is the actuaries for those two plans conducted an experience study as of 9/30/2011. So we have up-to-date actuarial assumptions for each of those plans. The general employee plan actually did an experience study as of 9/30/2010, so we did not request that they update that plan. So number one, we start with as accurate of assumptions as we can possibly have. Number two, each of the plans conducted a full actuarial study. So the police, fire, general employees, their own actuaries conducted a full actuarial study as of 9/30/2011. Then we basically summarized the financial data for each of the plans, looking at each of the plans relative to one another, as well as relative to the city in a composite form. So we were able to look at it with a citywide view, as well as a relative to each of the plans' views. From there, we looked at the two really important issues here, and you may remember the discussion on this. We looked at the annual pension cost, and we looked at the unfunded accrued actuarial liability, and we're going to get in a little bit more detail on both of those. But we looked at those and said, okay, if we would like to make some progress in lowering our annual pension cost and make some progress in lowering our unfunded liability, what moves can we make? So we identified a number of alternatives. We then went back to each of the actuaries for each of the plans and said, would you please rerun these assumptions, like we've got some scenarios, and let us know, based on your assumptions and your actuarial report, what the potential savings would be if we implemented one or any combination of these scenarios. So each of the plan actuaries conducted that report. We have that information. And now it's really where we are is it's kind of up to the city to begin to start to figure out which scenarios or combination of scenarios may be desirable. So then the next step is assessment. We assess the impact of these potential costs as of the fiscal year 2013, which is the period ending 9/30/2011. We assess these costs on the city budget. And we also took a look at the impact that these additional pension costs may have on the city's bond rating. One of the things that we noted as we were looking at this is that the Fitch ratings, which gives the credit rating quality for the city of Pensacola bonds, made one comment, and only one comment, about what might negatively affect the city's bond rating. And as you can see in this slide, they said failure to reduce pension costs could negatively impact the city's financial position and erode the credit quality of the bond. So it's pretty serious when your rating agency identifies that as the single issue that could potentially bring the credit ratings in question. So now here where we are. We're here, engaging in an open dialogue with all the parties, the employees, the unions, city council, the public, about the facts. And that's really, kind of my personal view of this is, and actually the way I view my role is, I'm trying to be the fact finder. I'm trying to compile the facts and present them in a way that everybody can agree and understand them. And frankly, if there are other facts to be gathered or other facts to be obtained, then we should obtain them. But there really is only one set of facts. There may be different stories, and everybody's got, sort of a story or an interpretation, but there's really only one set of facts. And so part of what I'm sharing tonight is what I consider to be sort of the relevant facts. So let's move on. First of all, annual pension costs by employee group. And you can see we've laid this out over the last 3 fiscal years. So starting in fiscal year 2011, the blue column represents the annual pension costs for the general employee group. The orange column represents the police, and the green column represents the firefighters. And it's pretty clear. You can see the trend is an upward trend. And for fiscal year 2013, the general employee annual pension cost would go from basically 7.8 to 8.7. The police would go from 4 million to 5.2 million. Firefighters would go from 4.2 million to roughly 6 million. So when you look at that in a citywide view, you can see that the annual pension costs from 2011 to 2013 have gone up by about roughly $2.5 million. So the annual pension cost that we're really facing in the current year budget cycle is this $18.4 million. And so the question is, of this $18.4 million, how much of it is the city's responsibility, how much is the employee's responsibility, and how much of it do we get covered by the state insurance premium funds? So this pie chart, again, is pretty self-explanatory. You can see that the employee contribution of $1.1 million basically comes from their out-of-pocket payroll deductions. As you might remember, the general employees contribute 5.5%, the police employees contribute 0.5%, and the fire employees contribute 11%. So when you take all those into consideration, the total employee contribution to the annual pension cost is $1.1 million. The city also receives from the state of Florida what's referred to as Section 175, 185 funds, which is basically the city's share of insurance premiums collected in our locality. And the state pays it back, and the reason they pay it back is for enhanced retirement benefits for basically safety employees. So it really goes to the police and fire enhanced defined benefits. So you can see they're both around $1.1 million, and then the remainder of the $18 million is $16.4 million, which is the city's expense. Now, if you go back in time, and we've looked at this, although I don't have a slide for this, about 10 years ago, the city's cost was around $3 million. So it's gone from $3 million to $16 million over roughly the last 10 years. Now, you heard Warren Buffett talk about, and we've spoken about this before, one of the major assumptions that goes into the actuarial calculation of the annual pension cost, as well as the unfunded liability, is the assumed rate of return. This is the assumption that the actuarial plans make as to what they believe the invested assets can earn throughout the duration of this plan. And it's pretty common to use 8%. Many municipalities do. Our fire and general employees use 8%. The police actually lowered theirs to 7.75% this year. So if you just look at this schedule for a second, the blue column represents what your annual pension cost would be at 8%. Well, it's 8%, and of course the police at 7.75. So that's what it is at 8%. Now, one of the reasons, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with this, one of the reasons why pension plans are in such serious trouble is that that assumption of earning 8% has been untrue for the last decade. And I think most financial analysts, investment professionals, and even yourselves who consider your own investment portfolio would believe that an 8% year-on-year return would be pretty optimistic and really perhaps unattainable. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to do a little bit of a sensitivity analysis, because since the city of Pensacola is basically on the line to pay the annual pension cost, what we're saying is, what happens if that assumption of 8% is not really achievable? And what if it's 7%? So we went back to the actuaries for each of the plans. We said, look, we'd like you to run all of your analysis using 7%, not 8%. And if 7% was in fact the number, then the annual pension cost goes from $18.4 million to $19.8 million. Now keep in mind, that difference is all to the city of Pensacola. There's not going to be any more employee contribution, and there's not going to be any more 175, 185 funds. So any increase is the city of Pensacola's responsibility. And then we said, let's do one more sensitivity analysis. I know it gets a little, actually it gets a little scary at this stage, but we said, let's look at it at 5%. And if we looked at it at 5%, the reason, by the way, the reason we chose 5% is that's the rate of return that the general plan and the fire plan has actually earned over the last 10 years. The police plan has actually earned around 4%. So the actual last 10 years has been around, let's just say 5%. So if we said, let's project forward and say the real assumed rate instead of 8% or 7% is actually 5%, then what's the annual cost to the city? And you can see it's about $31.8 million. So it's a significant number and a significant issue, not something that can just be, not looked at. Now, here's some more facts. The unfunded accrued actuarial liability, just to give you a little bit of background on what this is. Each of the plans calculates the present value of the future promise to pay benefits. So they look at their population of people. They make a calculation that says, these are the benefits that we project to pay, both now and in the future, to our participants as they work and as they retire. And this is how we're going to pay them. So they look at the participant population, they look at the mortality tables, they make their assumptions about 8%, and then they come up with a net present value of what that benefit promise is. Then they compare the net present value of the promise to the actual fair market value of the assets that are actually in the plan today. Now, they do a little bit of actuarial magic where they smooth gains and losses, but just for straightforward thinking about what this number really means, it's the difference between the present value of the promise to pay all future benefits and the fair market value of the assets on hand today. So the unfunded part is the difference between the promise and the value of the assets available to pay the promise. And you can see here in general, the unfunded liability has gone from $51 million to $61 million, basically, $60.5 million. In police, the unfunded liability has risen from $11.4 million to $38.9 million. Now, one thing I want to say here is on the police, just to be clear, the police had a change in one of their major assumptions about how they measure the investment value of assets. And if you would have normalized fiscal year 2012 to have taken into consideration that changed assumption, their $11,213,000 would have actually been about $27.8 million. So the real change between 2011 and 2012 using the same assumption is going from 27 to 38 million. And then, of course, fire has gone from 13 million to 17 million. So if you look at this from a overall city point of view, you can see that the unfunded liability as of fiscal year 2013 is $116 million. So to put that in perspective, the whole city budget, I think I heard, Bill, was like $222 million. And the unfunded liability in the pension plans alone is $116 million. One other thing, again, just to put things in perspective, that the city's share of the annual pension cost of roughly $16.4 million that we looked at, if you want to put that in perspective, the total ad valorem taxes collected by the city, I think budgeted for this year, or maybe last year's actual, was around $12 or $13 million. So the total annual pension cost by itself is greater than all of the real estate taxes that the city collects. Okay, so another sensitivity analysis. So if you believe 8%, then you're satisfied with $116 million of an unfunded liability. But we were a little, again, just want to understand what's out there. Like what, from the city's perspective, what's the scenarios that could be possible? And so then we said, let's run these same reports. Again, the actuaries for each of the plans ran the reports, fed back this information to us. If the assumed rate of return, rather than being the 8%, is actually 7%, then the unfunded liability goes from $116 million to $150 million. And if the assumed rate of return were to be 5%, then the unfunded liability goes from $150 million, or maybe the $116 million, to $280 million. Pretty significant. And again, we use the 5%, and I don't want to use 5% as like that's what we all believe the future is going to hold, because there are plenty of investment analysts and professionals in the marketplace out there who believe some number between 5 and 8 may be possible, but very few people are betting on 8%. And in fact, the state of Florida, when they reviewed the city of Pensacola's plans, encouraged the city of Pensacola to lower the assumed rate of return as being too aggressive at 8%. So the next thing we just wanted to look at is how many active and retired individuals are actually participating in the defined benefit plans. How many people are actually driving the annual pension cost and the unfunded liability? We just, again, wanted to look at this on an employee class. So you can see here, active members in the general category, there are 244 active members who participate in the defined benefit plan. Deferred vested, that means, just for background purposes, if a person is deferred vested, that means they vested in their defined benefits, but they've left the employment of the city and have not yet reached retirement age so that they can actually collect retirement benefits. So they're vested, but the payment of their defined benefit is deferred until they hit the appropriate retirement age at whatever employee class they came from. So you can see, and then 69 are in the drop program, and then we have 567 retired individuals out of the general class. And so the rest of the story is pretty clear. Police, 136 active, 21 in drop, 119 retired. Fire, 93 active, 22 in drop, and 157 retired. So if you look at it sort of in a different fashion, what is the pension cost per the participant? So the overall average, the red line basically represents what happens if we just look at the number of people who are either active, deferred, or in drop. How much is the pension cost spread over that group? Or if we look at everybody, including retirees, what's the pension cost? And again, you can see overall average, $28,000 for active, deferred, and drops. And then you can see in each employment group category what that number represents. Now, when I was here last, Councilwoman DeWeese asked me, how does City of Pensacola compare to other cities? So in anticipation of that question, I prepared a few more slides. So first of all, we looked at how does the City of Pensacola compare to other cities that have a similar sized payroll? So for example, we looked at, for the general employee class, payrolls between $10 and $15 million. And I think the City of Pensacola's general employee payroll is around $12.5 million. So this is really sort of right in the middle. One thing I would say, I downloaded this information from the Florida Department of Management Services. Orlando is reported at 0, but I went back and unfortunately I haven't had time to update this slide before tonight's presentation. The percentage for Orlando is actually 84%. So they take the lead over Pensacola in terms of the pension cost as a percentage of covered payroll. But unfortunately, Pensacola is in second place in a horse race that we really don't want to win. Next, how does the general employee's unfunded liability compare to other cities? And here the information actually is accurate, and Key West is actually overfunded, so 0 is accurate for Key West. But you can see that our unfunded liability as part of our general employee plan at $52 million, and these numbers, by the way, are all as of 9/30/2010, because 9/30/2011 information wasn't available yet from the Department of Management Services. But I can tell you this, it will get worse in 2011. Because 2011 was bad for everybody, and it was bad for the city of Pensacola. So these numbers aren't getting better. How's police stack up? Again, you can see here there's one city, Homestead, which as a percent of covered payroll has a higher pension cost. But unfortunately, the city of Pensacola is, again, leading the way, or one of the leaders there. Also, with respect to the unfunded accrued actuarial liability, here you can see, since I'm using 2010 data, I actually did normalize the unfunded liability for the police plan to the $27.7 million under the new assumption that they actually employed as of 9/30/2011. So it's a little bit better apples to apples comparison. And then lastly, for fire, as a percentage of covered payrolls, the fire pension cost is 85.4%. Now that's a big number and really kind of stands out. Keep in mind, just to be fair, the fire employees do contribute 11% of their compensation to cover part of this. So we shouldn't lose sight of that. But in any event, the pension cost, all in, is 85% of covered payroll. And then the unfunded liability also presents a similar negative view, where when you compare the size of our fire department to the size of similar sized cities and look at our unfunded liability compared to their unfunded liability, again, you can see that our unfunded liability is greater and far greater. So it's not a pleasant picture. So where are we? What are the proposed alternatives or possible alternatives? First of all, we have not proposed or considered making any changes whatsoever to any retiree benefits. So no person who is currently retired is impacted by anything that we're looking at. Now, I'm not to say that those kind of things couldn't be something that comes up later, but we have not evaluated that. But for active employees, and I'd mentioned this before and I'll mention it again, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Each plan is different. Every plan has different benefits. Every plan has different provisions. Employees contribute different amounts. Vesting periods are different. The retirement multipliers are different. Every plan needs to be evaluated individually. So you just can't say, well, you probably could say one thing. Everybody has as the way they calculate pensionable income, it's the highest 2 out of the last 5 years. So if you want to make a change there, you could make a change across the board for everybody. And I know City Council a couple of years ago looked at that and had a recommendation to take, instead of 2 out of 5, make it 5 out of 5, the average of the last 5 highest years. Nothing has been done. That's not been collectively bargained for. But I know City Council, and many of you would have been on that City Council, did look at that. In any event, let's talk about some of the alternatives. Change the definition of pensionable income. Most of you probably know that pensionable income is calculated using base income plus overtime. Talk about overtime for a second. Overtime is calculated at time and a half and is limited to 300 hours, but time and a half of 300 hours is 450 equivalent hours, which has the impact of inflating pensionable income by 22.5%. So if you take base pay, add 300 hours of overtime, you're at base pay plus 22.5%. So we can look at pensionable income perhaps include overtime at straight time, lower the number of hours, eliminate overtime altogether, lower the retirement multiplier. Each of the plans have different retirement multipliers. The general plan has a 2.1% multiplier up to 30 years, so they can accrue a maximum of 60, I think that's 63% of pensionable income. Police has a 3% retirement multiplier up to 33 1/3 years, so they can actually accrue 100% of pensionable income if they worked for 33 1/3 years. Fire has a limit that says they can earn up to 75% of pensionable income. Change how final average earnings are calculated. That's the 2 out of 5 versus 5 out of 5. Increase employee contributions. Remember, general makes 5.5%, police 0.5%, fire 11%. So who do you want to affect? Do you want to say police, you should make more? Do you want to say general, you should make more? You can look at all of those things. They're all possibilities. Everything's on the table. Modify cost of living. Cost of living is different in every plan, but one thing that's consistent in every single plan, it goes on forever. Cost of living never stops. So as long as the individual retiree is alive and his surviving spouse, cost of living happens. So if you're familiar with the power of compound numbers, cost of living has a very significant impact as time goes by. So you can look at cost of living, you can eliminate it, you can lower it, you can let it go for 10 years and stop it. I mean, there are many different flavors. So there are things to look at. Extend normal and early retirement. Almost every municipal plan that has made changes has made this change. So where police, I think, is 52 years old, I think fire is 55 years old, they're extending them out to 60 and 65. I mean, Social Security, you're not eligible to collect Social Security until you're 66 or 67. So people are starting to look at the retirement age and say, should it be different for our employees? Increased vesting periods. Vesting for general employees, I think, is 6 years. Police and fire is 10 years. So should vesting periods be extended, making an individual needing to work longer before they actually vest in these valuable benefits? Change the survivor benefit allowances. All of the plans have survivor benefit allowances that basically pay benefits, and maybe in some cases a slightly reduced amount, but to the surviving spouse. But they're not actuarially similar to the way FRS works. And let me just put a little number example together for you. If an employee today in one of the plans, and I'll pick on police, because police has 100% survivor benefit. If a policeman has a retirement benefit of $50,000, and under the police plan, basically what it says is that benefit is payable to the retiree and his spouse as long as they both shall live. So that $50,000 starts to be paid with COLA. And let's say, for example, the individual lives for 20 years, so that $50,000 becomes, call it $70,000. And then the surviving spouse is still alive. Her benefit or his benefit continues at 70 and continues on. So there's no cutback. So for example, what may be another alternative is the way FRS works. So in FRS, if you want to make a joint life election, that $50,000, if you make a joint life election, that $50,000 is calculated actuarially. So on year one, you start maybe at 35. And then at 35, it grows. And then that goes on for the life of both parties. But it's not 50 and there forward. So changing the survivor benefit allowance. Changing drop. So first of all, as you know, when an individual chooses to retire and go into the drop program, they stop accruing retirement benefits, but the retirement benefits now are paid into an account for their benefit. They continue to work for the city at their current employment at whatever current rate of pay they're making. But on that fund that begins to accumulate on their behalf, the city is paying interest at the rate of 4% and is paying a COLA benefit. So not only is that fund getting interest, but it's also getting COLA. So you can look at that and say, number one is 4%, like in today's marketplace, where 10-year Treasury bills yield 1.9%, and where FRS is paying 1.6% on drop. How is the city of Pensacola supporting 4%? And the whole COLA issue, you might look at that and say, well, if a person's in drop and they're working, and let's say, for example, their retirement benefit is $50,000, that, hypothetically, their compensation might be 65 or 70. So they're making compensation of 70. They're having the retirement benefit of 50. It's getting paid 4% interest and COLA. So maybe COLA is not necessary if the person is still working and earning a wage. So those are just some things to consider. Also, close the existing defined benefit plans. That's what was done with the general plan. If you remember back in June 2007, the general plan was actually closed. So what that meant was if you were an employee, a general employee, you were able to either choose to stay in the plan or go to FRS. But for every new hire, they went into FRS. There was no new people came into the general defined benefit plan. And no new employees have come into the defined benefit plan since June of 2007. So you could close the plans, that's an option, or you can freeze the plans. Now, freezing the plans is a little bit more decisive. Because if you freeze the plan, what happens is everybody who's in the plan, everybody, whether they've been here 1 day, 20 years, 25 years, it doesn't matter, you get what you get. So if you've accrued 25 years worth of benefits, those are yours, we're going to pay them to you, but starting on day 1 of year 26, you're going to be in a defined contribution plan where you make the contribution to your own plan. You have the ability to invest your own money, choose your own investment decisions. It's portable. You can take it with you. And so what happens is the city kind of gets out of the retirement planning business. They get out of the pension business. So since the city is at such great risk for market fluctuations, this could be considered to be an option that helps get the city out of the pension business. Now, recognize you still have this unfunded liability to deal with. It doesn't go away. It does go down if you freeze the plans, but it doesn't go away. And so the city still has to pay it off. And one thing that happens when you freeze the plan, typically the actuaries will give you a shorter time frame in which you have to pay that unfunded liability off. And sometimes the cost of that might be greater than the cost increases that are happening right now. So there's pros and cons to all of that. Pros and cons to all of that. So, like it's not easy. And I recognize and acknowledge none of this is easy. And of course, it's all subject to collective bargaining, which is in itself, a process. So I think at the end of the day, based on policy that the city leaders and yourselves will be responsible for making, is that some combination of this is probably going to happen. Because I know doing nothing is unsustainable from the defined benefits. And so these are some of the scenarios. And like I say, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and there are a lot of different ways to skin this cat. I mean, everybody can have different ideas about how they might want to make a change. Somebody, like for example, when we said 2 out of 5, change that to 5 out of 5, FRS actually is 8, the top 8 years. I mean, people can go at it a lot of different ways. Any event, those, in my view, are the important facts. And I'm certainly happy to respond, if I can, to any questions you may have.
Mr. Townsend, and I know several people probably would like to ask questions. I ask that we keep this short because I have a feeling we're going to have several sessions on this. Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is it possible to get a copy of your presentation?
Of course. Of course.
Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Townsend, it did get buried in our agenda. Usually we don't have those, so you do have it. But
I do have it.
Yep, in the agenda online.
Thanks.
Didn't mean to call you up, but I was surprised scrolling through. I was like, oh, there is something in here. 2 questions about the charts you showed. On the ones with pension costs versus covered employees, did that include, since we did make that change to putting new employees under FRS, as time goes on, it will become an infinite number because we won't have any covered employees. Am I reading that chart correctly?
Those charts don't include any of the employees who are in FRS. Those charts only include the cost for the defined benefit plans.
And I guess, right, but at some point, if tomorrow all of our general employees who are covered under the pension plan quit, they're done, then we have 0 covered employees, but we still have a huge pool of retirees. So we would have an infinite percentage of that. I mean, we couldn't even measure it in that sense. And so I guess my question is, on those other communities, do you have any sense of whether they're moving towards FRS for new employees, or are all of their employees still under their pension plan?
There are many different approaches that the cities are taking. Now, in that class of cities that I used for comparison, I did that basically because they were similar sized cities.
Sure.
Now, what each of those cities may be doing, I'm not certain of. I do have, I mean, there is information out there about what certain cities are doing around the state of Florida, and I think at one point in time I actually forwarded that to City Council back when I presented in November.
Sure.
And a lot of that is still ongoing.
Right. Yeah,
But
and I guess I was just
everybody's going down the same list.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, honestly, in my view, there hasn't been, in many cases, a whole lot of progress.
I was just trying to get a sense, our numbers on that we were an anomaly, and when I see an anomaly, I say, okay, is there something else going on underneath? And so I'd just be curious to find that out. And on the fire, we also had a very high number, and I know that when the fire pension comes up, we're often reminded by the fire department or the fire union, that there was a history that we underfunded in the past, and we're making that up, and in a certain number of years, we will have paid that previous debt off. Was that included in that number?
It's all the history is here and embedded in all this information,
Okay.
and I've heard that also. But, no matter what, the unfunded liability is what it is, and obviously it's the city's responsibility to pay that down. And there are different, when you look at the payoff of the unfunded liability, the way the actuaries make their calculation, it's in layers, annual layers. And you can see in a few years out in police, I can't remember the exact year, maybe 2016, it actually comes down a couple $1 million because one of those years gets paid off.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make the problem go away.
I understand. I was just trying to, when I see something odd, I say, well, wait, there's a backstory that I vaguely remember, and how does that affect that number?
Mm-hmm.
And so that I was just wondering how that was rolled up in there. And then I just have a general comment towards the council and the administration on this, that if anyone knows me, they know that I like facts and numbers too. That's one of the things that I often push on, and I appreciate all of the data you've given us, but the one thing I have learned on council is we end up not always getting to make our decisions based on facts and data, but often on the personal stories behind it. And I hope that as we move forward, that we are given enough support in making our decision to make these hard decisions, that when we are faced with those personal stories, we have that strength to stick with this. And having gone through the previous efforts on the pensions and seeing that we were almost there and could have done it, but we kept hearing, wow, if you do this, it'll affect me, and we don't want to do that to individuals, and we're individuals ourselves. So I do hope that you will work with the mayor on figuring out a plan, not only that has this data, but will help us in making these hard decisions, because I fear we're coming to impasse on unions. This is going to be a hard one, and I'm imagining a packed hall, and that's going to be a hard night for us. So I appreciate your efforts, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jarrett.
Thank you, Mr. President. And you had indicated at the beginning of this that you would like for us to be brief, because we most likely will not solve this issue this evening, and I agree with you 100%. However, when I came on council in 2000, this was a festering problem in 2000. Now, ladies and gentlemen and council members, it has blossomed. We're there. We knew it was coming, but we're there now. And a combination of the scenarios that was presented need to be brought forward simply because it will be drastic to some and not as drastic to others. We're in the mode now that something has to be done. We put it off as long as we can. We're at the point of blossoming, and we need to move with the scenarios, a combination of them, whatever combination you guys can identify, that will be palatable as much as possible to all parties. It probably will not be unanimous by any means, but at least I understand that something has to be done, and it has to be done quickly. And I would encourage you guys to continue to look at your numbers and to come up with those, develop those scenarios and bring them forward for our consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, item number 6.
There are no public hearings.
Number 7.
There are no quasi-judicial hearings either.
Item 8, Mr. Reynolds, Mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, and after some time of some sobering news, I'd like to bring forward some good news. I'd like to introduce a new budget analyst that we have that's joined the staff, and the reason normally we don't bring every staff person here to meet you, but she will be working hard on the budget, which is obviously the most important document that you will be contributing to in the future, and we wanted to make sure that you got to meet her. Ms. Gastonia Anderson, she is a budget analyst. She is a native of Pensacola and graduated from Pensacola High School. She also graduated from the University of West Florida with a bachelor's degree in business administration and obtained a master's degree in public administration from Troy University. So she's a candidate for my job as well. She worked at the West Florida Regional Planning Council for 3 years as a transportation planner, and from there moved to Philadelphia to work with the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission as a research analyst and was there for 4.5 years. She has since returned home to Pensacola and has been with the City Budget Office since January this year, where she has hit the ground running and has been doing just a tremendous job in the day-to-day work with putting together the budget that we're currently doing right now. She promises to be a valuable asset to the Budget Office as well as the City of Pensacola, and I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to welcome Ms. Anderson, and thank you for joining our team.
Welcome.
Next, I'd like to bring everybody's attention, not only council, but also the public, into a situation where we need some help. Mayor Hayward has twice now put out a notice that we're looking for applications for appointment to the Escambia County Mass Transit Advisory Committee. We're seeking city residents interested in serving on the committee. It was created by the Escambia County Board of County Commissioners for the purpose of advising the Commission on mass transit issues. The committee helps to facilitate a community vision by assisting in developing and maintaining effective and efficient mass transit systems in Escambia County, and regular meetings are held quarterly. If you are interested, please, if you could contact the city clerk. Again, we have yet to have anybody who has shown interest in being the mayor's pick for this particular committee. But I would certainly like to put the word out once again to everybody to see if we can find some interest and have some applications to that committee. And as soon as possible would be great, because the period has already expired, but we're going to put it out for another 2 weeks. Hopefully we can get someone that is willing to serve, and hopefully we have a lot of people that want to be a part of it, and we can choose among them.
Before you move on, Mr.
Yes,
Reynolds, Ms. Myers had her light on.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Reynolds, I want to thank you very much for bringing that to the attention of the public. I served on the first Mass Transit Citizens Advisory Committee, and we were tasked with the effort of coming up with a dedicated source of funding for ECAT. One of the things that came out of our first Mass Transit Advisory Committee was the establishment of a permanent Citizens Advisory Committee. We've had a number of citizens come here before us talking about their interest in sustainability, walkable and bicycle-friendly and mass transit-friendly communities. I think it might be worthwhile to contact some of those people and see if they would like to serve out, the Sustainable 350, I
Yes,
think, group.
Yes, ma'am.
If you have some contacts with that group, and I do, and I can shoot them an email, but this is really a very important committee to serve on, and I just want to thank you for bringing it to the attention of the public, and I hope somebody will step forward and I'll make some contacts too.
Thank you. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. President. And at this point, during the Committee of the Whole meeting, we had a couple requests from council in regards to, one was on the tree ordinance, and essentially, I guess the question is if I'm sitting back and I've got a tree in the back of my yard, what is the process for, one, recognizing that I have to do something with this tree, and two, what's the process for me to be able to do that? And the second thing is also in regards to some political signs. We are in the season of political signage, and I know that the that the council also had wanted some information on that. So Ms. Sherry Morris is going to present just a few slides on both those issues and also be available for your questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Council
Ms.
President, members of council. We will start with the tree ordinance question. Tree removal for one and two family residential properties within the city of Pensacola are governed by Section 1263 of the city code. There are exemptions in the tree ordinance for all single family and duplex land uses, with the exception of new subdivisions, which would be a new development, or existing residential uses in which a heritage tree is present on the property. The code does define a heritage tree. I won't read this whole section to you, but to summarize, essentially, a heritage tree is any tree that is on our protected tree list, which is in that section of the Land Development Code, that measures 34 inches or greater in diameter, as measured at DBH, which is diameter at breast height. It's a pretty standard measurement in the tree industry, I suppose. If a citizen were going to be looking into getting a tree removal permit, what they would do is contact the Parks Division of our Public Works Department. That's over at the Field Services Office, which is on North Palafox Street. Either Doug Durden or Billy Jarman would be the contact staff people at that division. Their telephone number is here on the slide, 436-5514. Either one or both of them will go out to the site and determine if there is a heritage tree present. If there is, they will issue a removal permit, and they will calculate the permit cost based on the number and size of trees that are proposed to be removed. And in our code, there is a calculation for removal. There's mitigation cost associated with replacement trees. It's on a sliding scale. So as I said, those staff people can calculate that number for any citizen that's interested in finding out what it would cost to remove a tree from the property. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Geralds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Morris, are the rules and the guidelines in the city, are they the same in the county?
No, sir, they are not. We have different rules within the city limits. We recently went through the update of our land development code to make changes to our tree ordinance, and they are not the same as the counties.
Thank you. Mr. President, I don't know if there's anything we can do, but it sounds silly to me that we're dealing with trees and we got to have different rules about dealing with trees. I mean, a tree's a tree to me. And I think that the rules and the guidelines between the city and county, what can we do to bring those guidelines so that you could eliminate the confusion for the guys who do tree cutting and those kinds of things? It's kind of silly to have a different guideline over, by a boundary that we create by the lines we draw and designate ourselves this or that. I mean, they're trees, for God's sake.
Well, I've got a couple of suggestions. One, we could either unify the two governments, or the county could bring themselves up to the same standard we've got in our land development code, because I think ours is far superior to theirs.
Well, based on what you said, your first comment about getting them in line, I don't know if we're bright enough to do that yet. But we need to sit down and talk about trees between the two agencies and work and iron that out. That is something in my mind can be eliminated as a hindrance for dealing with trees. It's just plain silly. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Myers, then Mr. Johnson, then Ms. DeWeese.
Yes, it's really unfortunate that, right on the city-county line, had the tree been on the just a little further away on the city right-of-way, that tree would be there today. I believe that. And I'm speaking about a tree that measured almost 5 feet in diameter, a heritage tree that was removed to build a sidewalk on Sanders Street. The county has plenty of right-of-way. That sidewalk could have gone around that tree. Sidewalks are built around the trees all the time. If you look at the Parker Circle Park, the sidewalk just curves and meanders around pine trees in the park. So I think that this is something that needs to be looked at, because when that tree was cut down, that really impacted that city, that community. And granted, most of that community is in the city limits, but there are parts of it that are in the county. And that's unfortunate that we have a situation where something that drastic can have a drastic impact on the beauty of our city residents. So, and I have spoken to Keith Wilkins about it, but I will begin to pursue this to see if there's something we can do about this. I mean, I'm a county resident. I pay more taxes to the county than I do to the city. And I want an answer from the county. I want to find out why this tree was cut down. It was not necessary. And what can I, as a county resident, do to improve the county tree ordinances? So I'm going to be looking into that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. President. And I was very involved in the improvement and enhancing our tree ordinance, and I can tell you that if we do try to get the county tree ordinance and the city tree ordinance aligned, that you're looking at serious opposition. Matter of fact, we had a county commissioner that came to our meeting, although he claimed he wasn't acting as a county commissioner at that time, that he was coming down as a public citizen. I will also say that he did bring county assets down to make his case, but he said that he was coming down as a private citizen to oppose any enhancement of our tree ordinance. So I think we're going to have opposition there, at least from one county commissioner and possibly another, if we try to get our tree ordinances the same. But maybe this is something we could put on our next joint city-county meeting, whenever we're going to have another one of those. I'd like to discuss this and would support the county ordinance coming in line with ours. I think their DBH is 60 DBH tree size, and ours is 34. So theirs is almost twice the size of what we determine as a heritage tree, if I can recall from recollection. But I would love to see the county get more in line with us, but I think you're going to have serious opposition. I think you're going to see developers come out and oppose it, and it will be one heck of a fight, because I've been there before. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Deweese.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I had actually requested that this be put on the agenda because I became concerned about the self-reporting or relying on the tree companies to do this measurement, and if they actually are. Because I had actually called, I stopped and asked about what appeared to be a heritage tree because it had a split in it, and what appeared to have been the other half of it was already laying on the ground. And I simply asked, was this measured, and was referred to the person back at the office, and they did not have a measurement available. They said they had measured a month ago. And I became concerned about the process and wanted to ensure that, as a license to operate within the city, that the tree companies are aware of our ordinance, and by accepting the license are signing off on that, and also to understand the penalties if they do not get a permit and cut down a heritage tree. And I don't know if you addressed the penalty part of that. He said it's okay
Question?
to answer.
The answer is that I'm going to have to get you that information, and I'll certainly get that out to council first thing in the morning.
Okay, good.
And that really was all my questions, was the process to ensure that we have something that's intact.
Okay, thank you. Be careful here.
Okay. We'll tread lightly. Mr. Reynolds, were you ready for me to?
Yes, and just a reminder, Ms. Morris is just the messenger.
Thank you. This section of the city code, it's also in the land development code in our section on signage, which is section 12.4 of the land development code. 12.4.6 subsection D is the section that actually speaks to political signage. The regulations are pretty straightforward. Maximum size, 32 square feet. They have to be supported by their own posts or uprights. They cannot be attached to a pole or a fence or a tree. They have to be supported by their own structure. They have to be installed on private property, no closer than 3 feet to the curb or the edge of the road. They cannot be installed in a place where they're going to obscure the visibility triangle and block the view of motorists. If they are installed on vacant lots or lots that have an uninhabited structure on them, there's a permission letter that's available on the city website that inspection services can approve for placement of political signs on these vacant properties. I think we've all seen them scattered throughout town. All signs have to be removed within 90 days of installation or within 5 days after the election being elected or eliminated from the race, after the election has occurred. Non-compliant political signs, they must be removed within 24 hours of notification. That notification typically comes from our Inspection Services Division. If they're not removed, the Public Works Department can go out and remove the signs, and those are typically stored and can be retrieved. However, the candidate must pay $2 per sign that's removed prior to the election and $15 per sign after the election has occurred. And that is, I think, basically the gist of it for political signage, and I can answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Townsend and Mr. Geraldson, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Did I understand you correctly on vacant lots that you had to come to City Hall to get a permission, even if a prospective candidate had received permission from the owner?
That's correct. There is a form just to ensure that the property owner has consented, because in many cases, the property owner may not be aware that a sign has been placed on their property, and once that begins, if the property owner is either not local or is not monitoring the parcel, it can become a problem with numerous signs being placed where the property owner might not be aware of that. So inspections does require that there's just a letter of permission that is submitted so they are clear that this was a legally placed sign and there was no trespassing involved, that the property owner has consented.
Is there a charge for that letter?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Geraldson.
Thank you, Mr. President. First question, is there a fine for failure to get a letter?
I believe that you would be issued the warning that you needed to remove the sign, and then the fines that would occur would be the penalty that we discussed previously, that $2 prior to the election.
And the other question is, the state, on state roads and state property, the law is different.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I learned
These are for city rights of way.
Okay. Yeah, we learned that firsthand, putting signs on state property, and the state picks them up and takes them to the dump.
Correct.
They don't ask you anything. They don't ask you any questions about it. And when they come by and see them, they have a little white pickup truck. They're collected and taken to the dump, period.
Yes, they are disposed
So
of.
then
in
people
the
need
state
to
road.
understand the difference between state property, state roads, city rights of way, state rights of way, and understand the difference before placing a sign in either of those areas.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. And Ms. Morris, what about the complaint I received was on approximately a 30-inch by 5-foot sign that was in a yard in a neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Is that legal?
As long as it complies with the 32 square feet, then it's legal in a residential or commercial area. Political signage is treated the same regardless of the zoning district.
So 32 square feet, would 30 inches by 60 inches, would that, do the math for me there real quick, is
I
that?
don't think you want me doing that.
That's well below. That's well below.
Yeah, I think that falls within the range.
Okay.
Eight
That
foot
would
by
be
4
acceptable.
feet would be 32 square feet.
Well, thank you so much, I appreciate that. And I did receive complaints about many of these signs popping up, and so I do appreciate you addressing this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gerald.
Thank you. I have one more question because I noticed that there are a number of those more jobs to Pensacola vote yes. And there's one in particular that I've noticed on a state road that is still standing. There's several throughout town. Who is responsible for removing those?
Typically, the governing agency would remove those, and whatever the political action organization that had posted those there would receive notice that they owed the fine involved. That would be my understanding of how it would work.
Well, actually, we could start raising revenues by finding out who's responsible for those signs and begin to collect. Because the election was when, in the end of January, January 31, and the signs are still all over town. Well, we'll collect them and fine them and raise our revenues.
Okay.
Thank you,
sir. Now, Gary, you put in, we've moved off the tree ordinance issue, but I'm going to allow you to speak, but I'm going to give you a choice. I'm going to give you 2 minutes now, or you can just save your remarks for open forum. Talk all you want not to on it that time. All right, thank you. Thank you. Okay, thanks, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's the end of the mayor's report.
Okay, all right, thank you, sir. Council Communications. Dr. Pratt, Ms. Myers, and Ms. DeWeese.
Thank you, Mr. President. I saw earlier this evening that Mr. Page was here, I assume to listen to the pension speech, and I just wanted to thank him for his loyal service to our community, and he's going to be moving on to St. Louis, and he was always a fair reviewer of the council, and so I thought, and the city, and all, but
Tennessee.
Tennessee.
What?
Nashville.
Nashville. Your sister's in St. Louis.
Oh, I don't know. I don't even know that I said that. Anyway.
We both heard it.
Okay. Sorry. But anyway, I wish him well, and I hope that, I know his shoes won't be filled it'll be hard shoes to fill, and so I wish him the best of luck. Thanks.
Okay. Ms. Myers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too would like to thank Jamie Page. I met Jamie shortly after he came here to Pensacola, and I'm certainly going to miss him. I'm from Nashville, and I'm very familiar with the Tennessean, where he will be working. It's a great newspaper. It's the largest newspaper in Tennessee, and I wish him a lot of luck, and I'm very happy for him that he will be working for such a great newspaper. What I wanted to bring up tonight is some really good news for District 2 in Uptown Pensacola. You may have seen the front page of the paper today. Local retail market expands. On Airport Boulevard, where the Kmart used to be, and which is now being not demolished completely, but certainly transformed. We're getting 4 new businesses: Fresh Market, Marshalls, DSW Shoes, and ULTA, a beauty supply company. And I'm just really excited about these retail businesses. Fresh Market is a very popular venue, and the thing that really amazes me is that this area of Pensacola, it is the economic engine of the city and of Escambia County. It's just amazing how many businesses are locating and developing along Airport Boulevard, and in that whole vicinity, we have the development over at the airport that's starting up with the big hotel there and the Commerce Park. This economic development engine is absolutely unstoppable. And especially that corner there at Airport and 9th. Blue Cross and Blue Shield renovated the old Blockbuster video store that was on the corner there, and just did an excellent job of remodeling that site. But while all of this makes me very happy and very proud of District 2 and Uptown Pensacola, it also reminds me of the contributions that we make, that this economic engine makes to the whole city, and yet how little in return District 2 has received, especially from LOST funds. We have great neighborhoods in District 2, and many of them are in walking distance to a huge workforce. Just anything anybody needs is right there in District 2. I can walk to Cordova Mall, I can walk to church, I can walk to Sacred Heart Hospital, I can walk any place I need to go is in walking distance from my house. And it is a part of the city that we should be extremely proud of and promoting. And yet this city does not spend a dime promoting Uptown Pensacola. And our neighborhoods need promoting. We should not have foreclosed properties in neighborhoods that are in close proximity to our primary business district. People should be flocking to live there because the houses are affordable. We have the infrastructure, we have great sidewalks, we have transportation. The transportation needs to be better. There needs to be a plan to connect uptown and downtown Pensacola through transportation, and that's in our comprehensive plan, by the way, and Cherie Morris did a great job developing our comprehensive plan and going through all of the work that she had to go through to get it approved and sent to the state. I also included an article by Councilman Sam Hall when he was the representative of District 2. I happened to run across a little newsletter he put out called District 2 News back in October 2007. And I'm not going to, he puts the figures here that I've gotten before from the mayor's office that shows how little District 2 has received in LOST funds. And yet we produce the largest amount of tax revenue, property tax and sales tax to the city. I just want to read just a brief comment. He says here, District 2 pays more in property tax and its businesses contribute more in sales tax than any other district, yet District 2 has received only 1.3% of the city's bricks and mortar expenditures during the 15-year history of the local option sales tax. And the reason I'm bringing it up now is because we're getting ready to go into budget hearings. And this district, nothing has changed since forever. And it certainly hasn't changed since October 2007 when Councilman Hall wrote this article. And we have communities there, that we have subdivisions that don't even have parks in District 2. The northern end of the city gets neglected. And this, when I ran for office, I ran to try to change this, to have a fairer distribution of the resources in the city. But what I'm seeing is that the emphasis is still on one part of the city, and it's the downtown part of the city. It's been that way for as long as I can remember. And yet we have a district, our primary business district, and the communities around it that should be promoted and invested in. So I will continue bringing this matter up, but I just want the public to know about the new businesses that will be coming to Airport, what a great contribution these businesses are going to be to our economic community, to our business community, and to our city. They will be hiring people, hopefully, people who live in the city. They will be paying taxes. So, and I expect these businesses to be very popular. So I'm very proud of District 2. I'm very proud of Uptown Pensacola, which also includes part of Councilman Wu's district, the airport, and the State College, parts of Councilman Gerald's district. So that's all I have to say tonight, and I'm looking forward to shopping at these great retail stores that are going to be coming to our district very soon, and to our city.
Well, thank you, Ms. Myers. I do want to say that the figures have changed a bit. The addition of the library that was built up just south of your neighborhood up there caused District 2 to be going from in last place into, I think it was 6th or 5th place. I know we overtook Mr. Gerald's on the amount of expenditure. So now District 5 is the lowest one. I know I opened up a can of worms by mentioning that, but yes, it has changed since October 2007. And Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I also wanted to congratulate Jamie Page on his transfer. I know I've enjoyed his reporting during his tenure here at the News Journal. He said with a big smile on his face he is a Tennessean, so he is going home, and I'm happy for him. I also wanted to mention and welcome a quite important visitor to town, the Eagle Sydney. I understand that to be the largest ship that has ever visited the city of Pensacola in our 453 years of history. It came in on Monday night on my birthday. I thought that was quite a nice birthday present. But I did want to thank Buddy McCormick and Offshore Inland for their confidence in Pensacola, and invite everyone to go down and see the ship. It came in on the 5th, and it'll be here till the 15th. And I've already seen people. I took a picnic down there on Tuesday. There's people from the north end of the county, people coming from Pace and Milton. Just the sense of excitement when the ship was coming into dock. I think it took 5 or 6 tugboats to get it in there. And I certainly hope we're getting an aerial picture. I don't know if that's our opportunity as a city or if the actual owner of the boat will be doing that. But it is quite a treasure, and I'm proud to have it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Geralds.
Thank you, Mr. President. On March 14th, I believe that's next Wednesday, the Equal Business Opportunity will meet, first floor City Hall at 5:30. The Equal Business Opportunity Committee is a subcommittee of the CMPA. Their responsibility is to address the covenant with the community that the CMPA has, and I would certainly like to invite individuals, because we're so close to the completion of the project. There are some loose ends that need to be tied together, and I would encourage you to please participate in this this particular meeting, especially the last meeting, so that you can monitor for yourself and not rely on hearsay and innuendo and BS, but rather attend the meeting to make sure that you hear for yourself what is actually happening, and if you have any input, it would be the time to have it at that time. It might perhaps be your last opportunity. But again, that meeting will be held here at City Hall, first floor, on March 12th, which is next Wednesday at 5:30. In relation to that, I will be scheduling and hosting a Gulf Coast African American Chamber interest meeting. It is apparent at this time that the Gulf Coast African American Chamber has been virtually non-functional. What I'm seeking now are interested individuals who have a genuine interest in having a bona fide Gulf Coast African American Chamber here in the city of Pensacola. I'm not looking for talkers and people that play around with ideas and don't intend to do anything, and I'm coming right to the point. If you are serious about having a chamber, we want you to have you at that meeting. I will announce it at the appropriate time, but it will be scheduled for next week. And as I've been checking with a venue, a place to have the meeting, many of the places are meeting and doing other things, but Friday may be our best date. It's a day that people don't like to give up because of personal reasons, but I believe that this is an important part of our community, and if you are seriously and genuinely interested, we would love to have you at the meeting. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Townsend, then Mr. Johnson, then Dr. Wu.
Thank you, Mr. President. Congresswoman Myers, I would really be leery of those facts that Councilman Hall gave you at the time he presented them. We questioned them. But in any event, I would like to recognize the fact that Adrian Stills, our pro golfer at Osceola, is going to receive an extreme dignity honor, if you will, from the Golf Hall of Fame. And I'm wondering if our city administrator has all the details where you might just share with us this honor that is going to be bestowed on one of our employees.
Yes, Councilman Townsend, and I can certainly get that to everyone tomorrow. But essentially, what is happening is that Mr. Stills is being honored for his actions in frankly breaking the color barrier in professional golf, and we're extremely honored to have him be a part of our organization at Osceola. And I'll be happy to get the particulars of that information out. Actually, David, do you know the particulars of exactly when that event is? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
I know. Thank you, Mr. President, council members. I think it's Wednesday that he receives the honor, and he's actually being inducted into the National Golf Foundation's Black Golfers Society. And I don't think I've got that quite right, but he is being recognized for it. Actually, he was the last African American to come out of Q school, which is the qualifying school, and well deserved. He's been in several PGA golf presentations, shows. He's well respected, and it's an honor that's incredibly well deserved. And if you know Adrian Stills at all, he is an incredible person. We're greatly lucky to really have him at Osceola, and not only an outstanding teacher and husband, father, but he just does a great job as our golf manager. So, yeah. Thank you.
And I will certainly get the full details out on that first thing tomorrow morning, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Townsend. Mr. Johnson, then Dr. Wood.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to try to make mine very brief, not talk for 5 minutes. But the newsletter that Ms. Myers was talking about is here, and I was reading this that she copied and shared with the rest of council, and it said trench warfare battling on the council. And I'm thinking, wow, somebody's making note of our recent meetings here at council. And I realized that I looked at the date and it said October 2007, so it was very interesting that they were battling way back then. But the other thing I'd like to do too is I'd also like to congratulate and wish the best to Jamie Page. He's done an unbelievable job. I haven't always agreed with Mr. Page, but he understands the issues. He reports the issues better understands them sometimes much better than I do, and I think most. He's very, explains things very well, and this community is going to miss him. I know is on his way to Tennessee. I think someone else mentioned St. Louis, but we corrected that, and he's on his way to Tennessee, and I wish him the best. I think he's going to join his wife up there, and I know that this community is going to miss him. He did a fantastic job, and I wish him the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Wu.
I'll also make it very brief. I also wanted to weigh in and ditto everything Councilman Johnson so eloquently said about Jamie Page. We're really going to miss you. The other thing that I'd like to do briefly is I'd like to give a congratulations to several people that dedicated a branch out at UWF for the Flight Academy, USS Ambition. This was a dream of the late Vice Admiral Fetterman. And though he's gone, his widow Nancy was there in attendance today. I'd like to also express congratulations to Vice Admiral Hoeing, who's been the point person in getting this established. And he and General Hoeing were there, and President Bentz, with 3 of the toughest bottles of champagne I've ever seen. They pounded and pounded and pounded trying to break 3 bottles of champagne, and finally they had to use the wall. So in closing, I also would like to acknowledge Captain Rasmussen's effort in this flight academy, and the late Captain J.J. Coonan. He worked awfully hard in getting this done. I don't know if it's sunk into most of the people in this community what a dramatic change this is going to make. This is really going to be a world-class operation, and my hat's off to the folks that have been involved. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the beautiful things about having modern devices is that when I don't know something, somebody reminds me that I actually have it already on my device here, and I'd like to give the information on Adrian. The National Black Golf Hall of Fame will be inducting Adrian into their organization. With he and just 2 others will be inducted in a ceremony in Tampa. Just to kind of give you a background of some of the things that Adrian has done in the past, and I think you'll find this remarkable that we have somebody of this caliber who is managing our golf course. As a player, Stills was a 3-time All-American at South Carolina State University, won 3 Florida PGA section events, 20 mini-tour championships, and competed in 2 U.S. Opens. He played the PGA Tour in 1986 and 1987, earning his playing privileges by qualifying at the PGA Tour Q School. Known and respected as a premier golf instructor and swing coach, he has been featured on the Golf Channel, Lesson Academy on 4 occasions. So once again, we're extremely fortunate to have Mr. Stills with us, and that's the information.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, item 10.
There are no petitions.
Thank you. Moving to the consent agenda that Mr. Townsend, thank you for chairing the meeting on Monday at the committee meeting. And there's 5 items. These are all items that passed unanimously in the Committee of the Whole on March 5th, earlier this week. Item A, appointments, Construction Board of Adjustment and Appeals. B, appointment, Parks and Recreation Board. C, property acquisition, number 2418, 2420, 2447, 2447P, Campus Heights subdivision. Item D, declaration and disposal of surplus city property, Montessori Drive. And item E, Escambia Treaty Company site acquisition for the proposed Palafox Industrial Park. What's your pleasure?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Dr. Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to hold item E.
Item E. Okay. You'll be voting on the consent agenda for items A, B, C, and D. Please vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you. Item E, Escambia Treating Company site acquisition for the proposed Palafox Industrial Park. Dr. Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize first that I wasn't here on Monday to participate in the discussion. And, you know, this project to take one of an eyesore in our community and turn it into an industrial park is great, and I am looking so forward to progress on it. But today I had an opportunity to speak with the city attorney and a consultant attorney on what risks we're looking at with this, and there really are some real risks that we are taking upon ourselves that might not have to be taken up if it's left in the hands of the county. And looking at the risks, I mean, they're real risks. I hope they never come to fruition, but we have to look at what's the potential for reward, and does it outweigh that risk? But I've been scrambling today to try to understand what is actually happening with this. But I really don't want to make a decision up or down on purchasing this based, this isn't just a Brownsfield, this is a Superfund site, and I don't want to make this decision based on a 20-minute phone call. I think that we could make a better decision and uphold the public's trust in our efforts to protect the city by reviewing some written information and having information from the attorneys on the risks of this potential action. I'm sorry that kind of information wasn't in our agenda, because the Superfund sites are a very unique beast. And so I'm going to ask tonight that we hold this item pending information from the attorney about what really the risks are to this city for acquiring these parcels. And so I will make that a motion that we hold this item in council pending getting information from the attorneys about the risks that we are taking upon ourselves by acquiring this parcel.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. I'll ask the attorney to speak first to this. I've been to several meetings over the last 5+ years regarding the creosote site, the Escambia treating site, with the EPA explaining what they've done and what they plan to do and what the process would be for it being turned over to the state and the county and or the city. And my understanding from the EPA folks is that once they've certified it to be turned over to us, that I'm not sure I'm using the right word, indemnify the city on that property. Whoever the final leaseholder is on it, that the federal government has got the ultimate liability on that. Now, maybe I've heard wrong.
And if I may, Mr. President, Cynthia Williams is available, and she can answer some of these questions if given the opportunity.
Okay. She's here?
Well, and I would defer to legal on that particular.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you know, I was not part of the negotiating team, and I hate to have a deferral night, but I would defer to our environmental consultant, Mr. Fiveash. I mean, I'm certainly capable of answering your general questions, but the answer is really fact-specific to each situation. I mean, generally speaking, without getting into all the details, you're correct. There's some bells and whistles to it. There are general restrictions placed on the property that have to be adhered to. But in terms of specific liability, I defer to Mr. Fiveash, who's been involved in this thing from the beginning.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Myers.
Yes, well, the motion is to delay the vote on this until we can obtain more information as to the risk to the city involved in having this land. So we could have that placed on the next agenda, and the city attorney could have someone present to discuss that issue with us. I would feel more comfortable voting for this if I had more information.
Ms. Deweese.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'd like to find out from someone with city staff if this delay will actually affect any of the decisions forthcoming once we do vote on this. I had spent a great deal of time on the PEDC. We discussed this at length there, and also with Mr. Thaddeus Cohen before his departure. He worked very hard on this. And I know that the EPA has gone to great length, as you had mentioned, Mr. President, about protecting who eventually is takes ownership or takes possession of the property, that it has to be an entity that goes on into perpetuity. And I think some of the confusion in the community has stemmed from private individuals investigating if there's an opportunity for a private group to come in and have the ownership of it, which would be very complicated. And that's been, some of the misunderstood issues. So, I've heard briefings on this many times. I'm certainly not going to step in and say that we absolutely should move forward, but I'm satisfied with the information that I've heard in separate briefings, and I'm disappointed if there wasn't enough information for some on council to make a decision. So I would like to know if it's going to impact anything, any funding that we're trying to get, or any grants, or any projects that we're trying to move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Wu.
I think she was
I wanted,
answer.
I had a question.
Oh, that's, okay. Gotcha.
Just yet in regards to delay, it won't have an impact on grants at this time. I think that the sense of urgency is in assembling this property under single ownership, and that has been where this real intense push has come. In order to truly market this and attract the tenants for this property, it needs to operate under one land development code. And with the confidential clients that do express strong interest in this now, their urgency is on being able to move towards site design. And until we've assembled this property under single ownership, we cannot take that step forward. So,
thank you. I will be supporting that we actually vote on this tonight, so I don't support holding it in council. Thank you.
Okay, and neither do I. Dr. Wu?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I've been watching this project from the very beginning, from the first time they put the curtains up around the fence to when they took all the earth and did the remediation. I understand the councilwoman's concerns, and I appreciate her bringing up the point she has. I, however, have full confidence that the EPA would not turn the land over to whatever body would then eventually turn it over to us unless the remediation was complete, because they're in charge of the remediation. So I have full confidence in moving ahead with this project as it is. In addition to that, this is the largest piece of the economic piece of land within the city limits of Pensacola. And to me, the stakes are too high to squander this. I understand, again, the concern and everything. But on a personal level, we've been talking about jobs, we've been talking about economic development. I urge the council full speed ahead. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Wood. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I will make mine brief, too. And I'm going to support moving this forward tonight also. I'll remind council that we just had a discussion about an issue with the Land Development Code, the counties and the cities not being aligned. So I think it's important that this does come under the city's jurisdiction, if you will, and under one roof. So I will be supporting moving forward with this. And I do understand Dr. Pratt's concerns, but I will be supporting this moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not unable to count, but I just do want to point out that, I'm not going to pretend to be a lawyer, but I will point out some of the things that I did understand from my conversations today, that while the EPA is turning it over as a clean site, it's only for certain chemicals. And if there are other chemicals that do come out that were a hazard that didn't get cleaned up, then the owner could be held liable. But my understanding then is that if the county retained ownership, that then they wouldn't be, because it would be thrust upon them as opposed to them actively pursuing it. So that's just one facet of the confusing nature of the liability on this. And while I agree that it would be great if the city did develop this, the county does do industrial parks, which we don't typically do. So I'm a citizen of the county, and I have faith in the county to be able to do some things correctly. And so if it's an alternative between having this site be our local community be held liable for it or not. I would prefer to have the county hold it and not be liable than for us to hold it and have some future liability. Again, this is my trying to piece together various comments and an understanding, and I would have rather had a full written explanation of the risk, because this is confusing and difficult to digest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The motion before us is to delay the vote here, so please vote. Okay, and that fails on a 3-5 vote. Well, actually, the no is, yeah. Yes, on a 5-3 vote, so, okay. Yeah, so we're back to the main motion now. And I'll repeat that. Pardon?
Motion.
We voted on her motion. That failed, yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And now we're back to the main motion. Item E, Escambia Treating Company site acquisition for the proposed Halifax Industrial Park. Any comments? Please vote.
Mr. Jones.
John?
John? Yeah. Okay, that passes 6-2. Thank you. All right. The next item is the committee report. These are items that did not get voted unanimously at the Monday meeting. The first one is item A, contract for management, operations, and maintenance between City of Pensacola and Community Maritime Park Associates, Inc., CMPA. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second, and Ms. Jewel Canada Wynn would like to speak to this. Welcome back, lady.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bless all of you.
Good to see you.
for being here. Jewel Canada Wynn, 605 West Blunt Street. And like all of you, I'm excited about the Maritime Park and its opening. However, I do have some concern about this particular management agreement. One of the concerns is that the park and its oversight. First of all, the council has overall oversight. From the council, we have the CMPA board, which is appointed by the council. Then we have 3 members of council who are on the CMPA board. And now we're getting ready to give the management contract to the City of Pensacola, who employees themselves are oversight by the mayor. So here, all of this, it just breeds of conflict and possibilities of conflict and who's actually overseeing what. And will there be fair oversight in this when it all circles, all of it up under the one government here? The other issue here is the inclusiveness of the management agreement. When the management agreement was decided at the CMPA board, a minority business was also included in that. A minority business or a small business. When you look at this, you had the City of Pensacola stacked up against this small business, and of course, the roll was on. This small business did not have fair play, in my view of it. In the bidding process, after the process was done, that seemed fine. But once that process was over and negotiations began, then I felt that there was not going to be fair play with this particular business. I talked to that business owner, and the business owner said some of that CMPA, that bid was discussed with her, but it was not from what she thought she received at the CMPA board meeting and what was voted on. And I think that comparison there of this small business and here the entire City of Pensacola farmed out whatever they wanted, carved out whatever they wanted to control, and then gave or tried to attempt to give this small business what they wanted this small business to have. And I think that particular setup is unfair. The City of Pensacola has worked hard to improve its images with small business and its commitment to small business, and I don't think that that particular process after the bidding process was fair to that small business. The other concern that I have here is the fact that the city itself is taking maintenance, landscaping, and all of those from the whole idea of the CMP, of this Maritime Park, was to help with private development. And I know Councilmember Gerald had stated that it is finally over. It is not over. I want to remind this council that a major part of the CMPA and the Maritime Park is private development. We cannot wait on our laurels and just go down there and watch baseball and listen to music at an amphitheater. We have to develop that private sector as well. And don't forget that that is a major part of paying for that park over that $40 million that we have. So those are the only things I have to say. I just want you to make sure that you are vigilant and making sure that it is profitable and that it is fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. DeWeese has some comments for you.
I actually just had a question, and I wanted to thank Jewel for coming down and speak about this, because it just made me think of something. I did read the contract at length, but will there be an opportunity for any subcontracting from this contract if, you know, the city wants to contract certain facets of it out to small businesses?
Mr. Reynolds.
Mr. President, the answer to that question is yes, there will be opportunities to subcontract.
And will this be advertised, or how will have we developed a process for that?
I do not believe that a process has been developed at this point.
Okay. That might be something for the EBO committee, would it, to address and maybe come up with. I don't know. I haven't been to the meetings to see if that's something they would take on or not.
Are you on that, Mr. Gerald?
Yes, I will. Are you calling on me now?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to clarify for Ms. Candida Wynn what I meant when I said it's over. And it's related to your earlier statements about the contract and how it's gone. At this level, it's over now. If it's not in there to do the right thing, it's all over. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Myers.
Yes, I just wanted to welcome Joel Canada Wynn back. I think your comments are well taken. I have shared the same concerns you have articulated. I will not be supporting this contract. I watched as the process unfolded, and I have some problems with the way this contract was entered into. I also have some concerns regarding how this contract will impact services in other parts of the city, even though I've been given assurance by Mr. Garza and Mr. Flaherty that there will be no negative impact on reduction of services to other parts of the city as a result of this contract. I still have my doubts. So I will not be supporting it for those reasons and some of the reasons you've articulated and Reverend King articulated earlier.
Okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Eleanor Johnson.
Thank you, President and City Council. As I brought to the council before as a citizen, I had referred a mentor, speaking of the small business, that did submit a proposal for services. And this company has over 15 years' experience. And
is this the one from Detroit?
Yes. Yeah. She was delayed today at the airport, so she wasn't able to be here. Still willing to do some services for the city. Was still very excited about it, but still left in limbo. Did receive a call for a process of possibly being a promoter and reapplying, and which did not sit too well with her because of all the effort that she put in to submit the proposal at the last minute. And after listening to 5 DVDs of the minutes, and in between submitting a proposal and doing oral interview, Mr. Johnson recommended that the city just handle everything before any of the committee members ever read a proposal. And so she almost missed the opportunity of even ever being able to present her proposal. But several of the board members did say, yeah, let's bring a face to the proposal. So she was able to present. My concern as a citizen is, how do we follow up when people submit proposals? Having received proposals myself for the arts, I always receive a letter or a conversation or a call or some formal document stating that I'm either being considered, and there may be some issues that need to be reevaluated to be considered, or I'm either not considered, one or the other. So as a citizen, and having recommended Pensacola and her having liked Pensacola, it's not looking very well in terms of our relations, of not following up and getting phone calls that are very vague. And she is a businesswoman, and she was bringing her own money to put up front. And getting back to what Mr. King brought up in terms of taxpayers' money, several of the board members said, yes, we would like a company that is hungry, that has excitement, that wants to show profit. So that's where she was coming from in terms of putting her own money up. And she also mentioned that if you delegate all those different parts of amphitheater out, you will not make a profit. You need parking, you need food and beverage, you need vending, you need all those entities, because as a whole, a concert itself may not make a profit. So I'm just wondering, how will we make a profit if everything is divvied out in different city offices? And that's my last comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ms. Audra Carter.
Good evening, President and City Council. I come to you today recognizing that we are challenged yet again, and I agreed that the go forward with the contract, and I also put a placeholder in it for inclusion. And the reason why I couldn't talk to the CMP board is because I use the SPE MBE program. So I'm here today to ask you to help me make sure that we're clear so we don't make any missteps on what that would be in terms of inclusion, because we had no way really of marrying the council's concerns being a municipality and the covenant with the community. That was a legal issue there. So I felt that so that we would have something rather than nothing, because we're going to sign the contract and try and move forward, we should put something there until the MT study is done in May. Without it, we would have no inclusion at all. So I took the liberty of finding the ordinance in 2007 and the ordinance of 2008, and I read them. And I'm sure that you guys is probably brought up to date, but what I need to know, because there's a couple of things in it is concerning, Councilman Gerald said, in the 2007 ordinance, when they did the presentation, it spoke to the Gulf Coast African Chamber and the CMPA and the city working together to make sure there's inclusion. So I think as leaders, we need to clarify that. It's a part of the ordinance, very important for us to be clear as we move forward so we can tell the community it's not a perfect plan, but we're working on it. Another concern is that the figures for inclusion of the goals some were 7, some were 5, and then some was 5 to 10. We need to be clear and specific. If we're going to do 10, and we can say that we're going to do 10, I need the council to say we're going to do 10 for this project. We've been struggling with that inclusion. I do believe everyone has the right place and they're all working together, but I think clarity is very much needed here so that everybody can say what they have to say and say, okay, without clarity, we know we can't go that direction. We need something. So we need clarity on that. It also said that we're going to have an ongoing program. And as the EBO chair, I have really, really tried to be more inclusive. And I think we're working well in that direction. And I think transparency is really important. It's what I'm trying to do today with you. I cannot bring this to the CMP board. This ordinance has to do with this council. And it truly is only that until the MGT study comes back. And then, of course, the board and us, we have an opportunity to look at it and adjust these numbers. So what I'm asking you to do today is to just clear up those matters and help the Equal Business Opportunity Committee help to move forward with making it inclusive. And I do believe that this community has moved far, and we're going to continue to move in a better direction. But this is a new day, and change is tough. And I pledge my support to the board, and I'm sure the board does, and I speak for everyone, and those that are here will tell you, we really want to do the right thing. We're really trying to get it better. And we do realize we can't leave holes in legal documents. And moving forth, I think that that's the clarity that I need as a board member to make sure that our board, or the CMP, is making the right decision in terms of inclusion. And those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Waste and Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did want to ensure that the wording within what we're voting on tonight, if that carries through with what we currently have with our city SBE, MBE, WBE goals, and should those change, be updated, that would carry during the term of this contract as well, so that that is clear in this contract.
Mr. Reynolds or our lawyer, either one. Step up.
Thank you, Mr. President. Like any other contract that the city is responsible for and a party to, our ordinance will apply to this particular contract.
Does that take care of you, Ms. Deweese?
I believe so. I know Ms. Carter articulated that in one place that it was 5 to 7, and another place it was 10, and we updated everything for the transition in government. So I would hope that that was addressed at that point. But I just want to ensure that whatever we're being held to as the city, if we subcontract things out, that we're adhering to that requirement.
You know the answer to that, Mr. Reynolds?
I can tell you, Mr. President, that all valid ordinances will be.
Okay. All right.
We have a responsibility as the contracting partner to ensure that we operate under the constraints of our current ordinances.
I see gentleman stepping up here. If you would allow him to speak, Mr. Reynolds.
Absolutely, sir. Mr. Spears.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of council, I just want to specifically reference the clause in Article 7 that states the city will follow all SMB, MB policies and procedures as adopted by the city council in the execution of this agreement, and that is not time sensitive, so if those ordinances change, it would apply.
What is the issue, though, that Ms. Carter brought up, that 5 to 7, 7, 10?
I'm not aware of those issues. I believe they're in the current ordinance, and different percentages of participation that's stated in various locations within those.
Okay, all right. Ms. Carter?
In the ordinance, it gave a range. It wasn't specific. And ordinarily, I would be okay with that, but because I'll speak for myself, I feel like we've gotten in so much trouble not specifying. 20 years from now, if I'm not here, I want my grandchildren to say, you know, grandma she was looking at things. So if it's 5, then someone can say it was really 5. Someone said, well, no, it's 7. Sometimes you just need to be specific. And unless there's a reason why we can't, I'd like for this particular project to be 10, at a minimum, because we're going to come back and do the MGT study, and we'll then let that override, and it'll wipe the slate clean. But if I allow no number or a range, then it's just 5 is a lot different when you're talking about millions of dollars that can be led to a conclusion process. And it's about money at the end of the day. So it does say, and I will give this to the administrator, it does say 5 to 10. So it leaves it up to the city to do or not do, or make it 5 or 10. But I think we need to be specific and just go ahead and do a number. And I don't see any reason why we can't use 10, because over the last 5 years, we've done tenant better. And I believe we're going to do more and more, but I think we need to have a ceiling and a minimum.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Townsend, don't go too far. Audra.
Can I just finish really quickly with
Yes,
my
ma'am.
questions? I'd like to know, and I know I'm putting someone on the spot over here, so I apologize, but is there an issue if we've been at 10% already of stating it to be 10% or higher? Will that create a problem with this contract?
Mr. Reynolds?
I'm not aware of any problems. You know, we are, again, constrained by the ordinances, and but I'm unaware of any issues.
Well, let me ask the attorney. He keeps hiding back there behind Ms. DeWeese.
I'll lean back sufficiently.
Based on tonight's proceedings, I'm trying to get as far away as I can from everybody. If the question is there a pure legal problem with that, the answer is no.
Okay.
Okay, then my final question is if we have in fact been at 10, can that be verified by a staff member at this point, or where did the number come from, Ms. Carter?
Yeah. Well, if you look at the historical reports, which we do have more current reports that do that quarterly, and the purchasing department has been very diligent, and I think you will see, 9, 10, or I'm sure it's verifiable, or whatever that number is, let that be the minimum, and then increase from there, and of course, look at it again when we have the MGT figures after May.
So as I understand, it would be a minimum goal. It's not an absolute number. So it's almost an act of good faith to do that. So I'd like to make a motion that we amend this to be a minimum goal of 10%
Second.
or higher.
We have
Second.
a motion and a second to amend the main motion. Clear all the lights right now, please, because we need to just speak to the motion that's on the floor. Okay. Anybody wish to speak to this particular motion? Mr. Geralds.
Thank you, Mr. President. What Ms. Carter is referring to, and it was in I read it in the pre-disparity study that was done by MGT, and the language that has stood the test of the courts and has been accepted and was recommended that we use is a percentage goal, not a set-aside. It depends on the words that you use that the courts will accept as acceptable. So when we're talking about setting goals and identifying things that we would like to do, the appropriate language would be percentage goal. And that refers to the good faith effort that you were referring to, and all of that goes into that. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other, fine with that, Ms. Carter?
I'm fine.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
So we're voting on the amendment that's on the floor, and that's to have a goal minimum of 10%. Minority inclusion. Please vote. And that passes 7-1. Okay, thank you. Now, we're back to the main motion now. I had several lights that were on. People were wanting to speak. Ms. Dubuisson is waiting to speak to us. So if you want to speak to that, just indicate. Ms. Dubuisson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise this evening because I received a call this afternoon from the person that Ms. Johnson referenced from Detroit who had been delayed in Memphis. She really wanted to be here to speak to this council. And I felt in a very uncomfortable position of responding as a citizen of Pensacola because I had had quite a few conversations with her pursuant to her visit here. I did not know her before this entire process began, and I really did not expect myself to be involved at this level of the contract situation. But I would like to bring to the council's attention that while I do realize you probably have the votes that this contract will move forward, and that because of time constraints we probably don't really have much choice as a community, there was issued, in order to obtain the respondents for this contract, an item called Request for Proposals, Property and Facilities Manager for the Community Maritime Park Project, October 26, 2011. There were many meetings in between the time that this was issued and and this event has come. And during those times, there's been this generalized discussion by the CMPA of the need to include the minorities at all levels. We had a first-class, world-quality event promoter, experienced with local governments in 2 different states, who came down here and offered to cap the losses at this city. I believe her cap was $238,000, that would be the most that would ever need to be put in on an annual basis based on her budget. The CMPA decided that it was probably more appropriate to have the city, because no one believed it could be done with that minimum of a loss. And as you look at the contract, you will see that the city itself does not believe that it could meet that. There was some question raised as to the credibility of this company being able to do it, but no one did the research in advance. They have done it after the fact. In coming to the final vote, the CMPA at the final stage said, we would really like to give this contract to the individual from Detroit, but because of experiences we had with Scott Davidson, we don't want to put ourselves in a similar situation. And so we're going to strongly encourage the city to work directly with this experienced woman to bring her abilities and her knowledge to the benefit of this community, which she voluntarily spent 3 times her money coming down here on short notice to respond to and to speak with. She spoke to our mayor, who encouraged her to submit the proposal that she did, because at that point the city was not going to submit a proposal. She spoke with the EBO officer. She spoke with quite a few people. So the idea appeared to be that the city really wanted to get the best opportunity for itself. But in looking at the contract, Mr. Flaherty and his crew are a wonderful crew of parks and recreation people and neighborhood services people, so this does not reflect on them. But on the professional experience category of managing the events and the types of concession sales and amphitheater needs that we have, the experience is not there on the city's part. So we are taking a risk. We are thinking that we are going to be able to get up to speed. And in all of this time, there has not been, I believe, appropriate communication to try to include this woman. It is a loss to the city, and I would ask you each to review the request for proposals and look at how many steps were eliminated during the process. Mr. Johnson, who just conveniently left the room, was head of the EBO, and the evaluation sheet, which was included in here, which 2 members of the CMPA filled out before they had to leave the meeting that night, were never collected. It became a different process. Please correct this in the future, and as contracts are given from the city from this point forward, please make certain that whatever advertised process is advertised, that is the one that is followed, and that when the body comes to a conclusion, that is what is followed through on.
Just stay there, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm hesitant to speak on this particular issue, but the bottom line is that these are all issues that probably should have been taken up with the CMPA. The city and Mr. Flaherty's department did an outstanding job in a presentation, and the CMPA determined that they were the best individuals to bring this forward. And as the city bringing this forward now for city approval, I don't know about the issues, frankly, that Ms. Dubuisson is bringing forward, but I can tell you from the city's perspective that we're very confident that we can move forward and achieve these goals and objectives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Myers.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Ms. Dubuisson for coming here tonight and speaking and bringing these things to our attention.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I witnessed some of what you're talking about myself, and I had some real concerns about it at the time. Thank you.
Thank you,
I'll speak further at a public forum in the future about some recommendations that I would have.
Mr. Johnson.
I call the question.
Well, there's not a second on that, but we don't have any more lights, so.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, all right. Everybody please vote on the main motion as amended. That passes 7-1. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes.
may I ask a question?
Yes.
Now that we've amended the contract, it has to go back to the CMPA, doesn't it?
I don't know the answer to that.
I think the CMPA gave the chair
Mhm.
the authority to handle changes of that order, because that language about the minority small business stuff was not in the contract that was approved by the committee, and we just sort of, or by the CMPA, we gave the chair. That was my understanding. I'll let those people who know these things know.
Okay, well,
Get out of the way. so they can see.
I mean, we voted for an amendment to the agreement, so does it have to go back before the CMPA?
My understanding is that you didn't vote to amend the agreement. You imposed upon us as city staff to
Staff.
ensure that we are going to operate within a 10% boundary.
Okay,
I don't think that requires an amendment of the agreement.
all
I
right.
think that's an internal action that the council has stated that we will fall within. In other words, it's not something that the CMPA is actually a party to. That's internal to the city.
Can I have the motion read back, Madam Clerk, that was voted on?
That
The
the city
amendment.
council, here's the main motion.
Okay.
That the city council approve a contract between the city of Pensacola and CMPA providing for management, operations, and maintenance of the Vince Webb Senior Community Maritime Park. Further, that city council approve a supplemental budget resolution to provide funding for said contract. And as amended, that we would have the SBE, WBE, MBE, 10% goal minimum.
And if I may, Mr. President, if you look at it this way, there's nothing that the CMPA could do with that particular resolution. That is an internal city requirement at this point.
Okay, good, thank you. Dr. Pratt, your light's on.
I
No?
didn't mean for it to be on, sorry.
Okay. Well, we're finished with that issue. The next item on the committee report, item B, proposed park and recreation facility naming or renaming guidelines and procedures. That City Council approved the proposed naming and renaming guidelines and procedures developed by the Neighborhood Services Department and adopted by the Parks and Recreation Board as amended to include that elected City of Pensacola officials and currently employed city staff shall not be eligible for consideration until no longer in office or retired from city service. That motion passed 5-2. Council members Johnson and Townsend dissenting.
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Geralds.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple of things here. I looked at the recommendation several times, and in addition to that, I did some research on these procedures as they take place in other cities. Simply because when I look at the present policy or what's being proposed, I found that it had several shortcomings. Several. And before I refer to those shortcomings, I will remind you, I know that you would all be disappointed if I did not give you your usual dose of history as it relates to how we conduct our business. But before we take a final vote or a vote on this, I wonder how many of you remember when the Bartholomew family came down with their idea about the library. If you can remember what happened with that. And I don't recall the present policy, whatever that is, having anything to do with it. But if you all remember how the emotions creeped into the room and several proposals were presented and brought forth as to what ought to happen and what ought to be done. And as I recall, and most of you I'm certain will also, that we were in kind of a pickle. It just turned into something that it should not have been. I don't know where the idea of 4 years, if that part was scratched, was that part scratched too?
Mhm.
That was taken out?
Yeah.
That we don't
That's
have
the
to
part
wait the
that's
4 years. The other part of it is that in the 3 cities that I looked at, I discovered that each of them admitted their misstep in that they did not allow for citizen input. And if you go back to the Bartholomew case, you will recall that there were several people, and whenever we do this, whether it's naming a building, a street, or anything else, whenever this happens and a name is proposed, there will be people that will be for it, and there will possibly be people that will be against it. So how do we solve the problem? Well, I looked at it and I said, wait a minute, and by the way, most of the policies are developed by council, not the recreation department, or not the department, but the recreation board. Because if we're going to have a policy that we are expected to approve and support, then we need to have a hand in the development of that policy. So I'm going to recommend that we send this back to committee for reconsideration. I move that we send it back to committee until we get it right.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Dr. Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I'm sorry I missed the discussion on Monday, but I thought that's sort of what we were trying to do last time, was we sent it back to committee because we hadn't discussed it. And Mr. Geralds was alluding to the 4-year question that got taken out, but I wasn't sure what other issues were burning issues that didn't get resolved on Monday. If there are things you could.
Before we go on, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to defer to our parliamentarian on one side or the other. Is this debatable?
There's no debate. Goes back.
To send it back?
No. I already checked.
Am I doing this?
That's why I did it. I already checked.
And what was the answer?
No.
That was what my thinking was. That's the reason I asked. I don't have my notes with me here tonight, but I don't think it's debatable.
I'm going to concur with Councilman Geralds.
Okay, this is not debatable. My apologies. Please vote. Okay, that fails on a 3-4 vote, so we're back to the main motion.
I think it's not debatable. It just goes back. Who's got their laptop with them?
We have to vote.
Yeah, I mean,
Otherwise, everything would end up back in staff.
Yeah. So we're back
I
to the
like
main
that
motion.
rule. Had a lot of stuff
Any
I'd like to
discussion
see.
on that?
Thank.
Seeing none, please vote.
What are we voting on?
The main motion.
Oh.
Okay, and that fails on a 4-3 vote.
Oh, right.
Anyway, I guess it'll go back to committee anyway. Or staff.
Mr. President?
Yes. 4-3. It needs 5 votes.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, Ms. Deweese?
I just wanted clarification on that because it failed here. What happens to it if it can go back and be discussed? Because isn't there a 12-month
Well,
requirement?
you can, somebody from the prevailing side can move to reconsider. And it would take just a simple majority vote to do a reconsidered vote.
So if someone from the prevailing side still has issues with this, just as was stated 2 weeks ago, please get with staff and devise this as it pleases you.
Okay.
And, or not you directly, but whoever has those concerns. I'm quite shocked that it failed tonight. This
And
is a
just so the
simple
public's clear, the
solution.
prevailing side here, even though it was in a minority, is the no votes.
The no votes.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Yes, Mr. Geralds?
Yes, I just have one question, and that would be to provide an opportunity for a public hearing as well as for an opportunity for council to have a look and a hand in the development of this policy. That's where we need to be. We have someone else developing a policy to send to us to approve and enforce, and we've had no hand in it. So we need to take responsibility for our authority and responsibility to be a part of what actually happens. You know, I heard some things on Monday, and we have streets or buildings or things named after living people and just a whole bunch of things that when I looked at the intent of this ordinance, as well as when I looked at 3 other cities who have a smart way of doing things, it is our responsibility to be involved at the front end so that we don't have the Bartholomew kinds of debates and arguments. Because when the public came forth, and of course, all firefighters, under those circumstances, all firefighters are deserve, you know, consideration, particularly when they lose their life in the line of duty. But those things didn't come out. We were talking about some other things. We need a policy that we can all sit around so that when we do vote, we will have it fixed in our minds and in our brains exactly what the intent is. The intent of this policy, I don't know, it came from the Parks and Recreation Board, and we need to look at what they're asking us to do and then put our say-so apart, make that a part of it. And then that way we won't have to have these kind of discussions when it comes up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'm gonna make everybody's head hurt here just a little bit. I'm comfortable saying that what I said about the vote to reconsider is correct. But I need to have an answer from the city attorney tomorrow sent out to the rest of council to make sure that I'm right on this. Again, I don't have my notes here in front of me, and he can confer with the city clerk on this, either between Robert's Rules and Order or council procedures that we've adopted on the vote to reconsider, that would be a non-amendable vote. So we'd just be voting simply on the same thing that we voted on tonight. Now, if you had another 2 people here, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Spencer, the result may turn out to be different. So the prevailing side, and who were the 3 no votes?
That was Councilmember Geralds, Councilmember Townsend, and President Hall.
Okay, so it'd be one of the 3 of us that would have to bring it up for reconsideration. And once Mr. Spencer and Mr. Johnson's here, we could vote on that. But my understanding of our rules is that it would be non-amendable. So my idea is if we're really interested in getting something done that Parks and Recreation Board would like, it's going to have to be a different animal, you know, that we're going to have to try to cook here, or just leave things as they are. I'm not sure how different it's got to be for it to be legal for us to be able to bring it back for consideration. Again, I'm going to leave that up to the attorney and Mr. Reynolds and the city clerk on that. But I'm pretty confident, though, that if we vote to reconsider and that once that vote passes, that it's a non-amendable motion. So, okay, Ms. Myers and Mr. Geralds.
I did not have my light on to speak.
Mr. Geralds.
I did. Thank you, Mr. President. Now, there is a way to solve this problem if we're willing to do it this evening, because there were, in my recollection, there were 4 ideas on the table. One was the Exchange Park renaming. The second was the Ronald Townsend tennis courts. The third was the Resource Center at Woodland Heights and the renaming of Woodland Park after the Reverend McNeely, who was the previous pastor at, Bethel. Now, if the council is willing to waive those rules for now to move those 4 projects forward, I could live with that. In that case, everything's on hold until we solve the problem.
think everything's probably on hold.
Okay.
Dr.
Mr.
Pratt.
President, may I be
Yes.
heard on this?
Yes.
I don't know if this is going to be helpful or not, but the answer to whether or not the motion to reconsider is amendable, and I'll defer to clerk, but my understanding is it's not.
That's my understanding.
Thank
Dr.
you,
Pratt?
Mr. President, I was just going to say that I think we spoke tonight that we weren't going to pass what it was, and if the prevailing side wants to bring this back up, probably committee's better, and we need to just move on from that. Thank you.
Okay, good. I agree. All right. Report of the Community Redevelopment Agency. Mr. Gerald's?
Oh, yes. The chair's not here, huh? Okay. Well, the Community Redevelopment Agency met on Monday. We approved the minutes of the February 6, 2012 board meeting. We also approved an amendment to the Economic Development Agreement with disposition of property between the Community Redevelopment Agency and the City of Pensacola to Hardix Technologies Incorporated. Another action that we took on Monday was approval of the February 6 CRA board meeting. And item number 2, amendments to the Economic Development Agreement with the disposition of property between the Community Redevelopment Agency and the Hixar Technologies Incorporated. All motions or all business that came before the CRA were approved with, of course, the members on item 2, member DeWeese abstained, and the other motions carried unanimously. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, sir. There are no ordinances on the first reading, ordinances on the second reading.
Item 15A is proposed ordinance number 05-12, an ordinance to be entitled, an ordinance amending section 7-4-14 of the Code of the City of Pensacola, Florida, providing for civil citations and fines for reinforcement of open container violations, providing for severability, repealing clause, providing an effective date.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Comment? Please vote. And that passes unanimously. Mr. Johnson and Spencer absent. Okay. Resolutions.
Item 16A is resolution number 06-12, a resolution to be entitled, a resolution authorizing and making revisions and appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2012, providing for an effective date.
Move the approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Please vote.
You said you didn't work.
And that passes unanimously also. Unfinished business. Dr. Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just, this evening, Mr. Reynolds mentioned a couple of times about as long as the ordinances are valid, then the city is held to them. And I would just like to ask that as those ordinances that are deemed invalid come up, that they get brought to the council for us to revise our ordinances, because our ordinances are the public statement of our laws, and for people to look at the municode.com and think these are the laws of the land, and for those not to be the ones that are actually being not just enforced, but even obeyed. I think we need to make sure that we are clear. You know, the way our federal system works, it goes to the Supreme Court, they determine if it's constitutional or not. If it's non-constitutional, then the Congress revises the laws. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I want to, on that note, I want to apologize to the city administrator tonight. I put him on the spot a few times on that very issue over the minimal participation requirements. And one of the things that, even after you've been on here over 5 years, as I have, that is still confusing is the very complex relationships that different bodies in this city have with one another. You know, you'd think it'd be a pretty simple thing with the relationship of the CRA and the city council. All the people are exactly the same members, but they do have different rules and they do have different requirements that the state governs us by. And we have to be mindful of each one of those. And then you've got the idea of the CMPA and the contract that exists between them and the city, but they're also an entity of the city. I'm probably not choosing the right legal word there. And so, anyway, I apologize to the city administrator for that, but thank you for, in the end, simplifying it for us and allowed us to act on that issue. Okay. New business. Seeing none, brings us to open forum, Mr. Sansing. And then Ms. Dubuson. No, you're fine? Okay, thank you. Mr. Townsend, do you want to speak first?
Well, I just wanted to say I was concerned about some of the allegations that were made earlier regarding the process that CMPA did in terms of awarding that bid on the RFP regarding the Community Maritime Park. If I heard correctly, there was some allegation that some of the votes were not taken or were not recognized. And if that's true, I think we all need to be concerned about whether that actually took place. I went on and voted for the action because it had gone beyond the scope of what we actually could do anything about it. But I would hope whatever process and bidding that take place, that we won't have these kind of allegations without firmly checking on them to see whether the accuracy of them before we make a final decision. And if I could ask Ms. Dubuson to, because it appears that she has extreme knowledge about what actually took place, if we could just get a few answers to that. I appreciate it.
Okay. Ms. Dubuson.
Yes, I'll be glad to. If you refer to the document that, I quoted earlier, was dated October 26, 2011, it was circulated, it was available online, and you go to page 10, it says evaluation sheet, Community Maritime Park, Property and Facilities Manager, written presentation, and there are points to be awarded. Composition and qualifications of staff, 20 points. Experience of the firm, 15 points. Ability to meet time and budget requirements. There's a point system that was established, and it weighed for small business, minority participation, local business participation. This individual established a business here, established a residence here, was interviewing staff, and met the criteria for all of this. This sheet was never collected at the meeting in which this contract decision was made. 2 members of the board had to leave, and they had filled out their sheets because there was ongoing conversation, and one of them said, well, I turned in my sheet so at least people know, and I said, it doesn't matter if you filled it out or not, they were not counted. And that was a conscious decision that the CMPA board made, to just throw out the evaluation sheets. That is a choice that they made, and I'm not going to challenge their right to make that choice. I'm just saying it was a poor choice, because when you advertise in an RFP and say these are the standards upon which these things will be evaluated, I believe you have an obligation to live up to them. As Ms. Johnson referenced earlier, at the prior meeting, they had decided to just go on and award it to the city without ever even reviewing the RFPs. That was the first motion that was made, which I at that point rose and said, wait a minute, if you think you had issues with legalities before, if you do this without going through any kind of a process, you're really going to have a problem. So then they had the next call meeting, which was like 3 days or 4 days later, I can't remember exactly, and the woman flew down to be there. And then the point system was not used. And she was not the only person who was not judged. SMG was not judged. The city had submitted 2 separate proposals, one for the management and one for the operations and maintenance. So they were all just sort of combined into a singular contract that was moved forward, with the caveat at the time of the vote that the city was strongly encouraged by the CMPA to engage Ms. Mauiz, I believe her name is, at any level that could comfortably be worked out. And that was what was left. And it was sort of a hanging chad, so to speak, kind of, dictate at whatever position the city and she were comfortable with. Well, that did not occur in conversation. And to this point, Mr. Reynolds was not involved with it, but the attorney of the chief of staff, excuse me, has been in conversation with her, and she sent him the sample contract so that he had something from which to evolve a contract that was presented to you folks. So she has continued to offer her services on a voluntary basis, on a continual basis, and continuously there has been no inclusion, and yet they then this week said, please send us your references so we can see if we might include you so you can be included as a promoter for the future. Well, they had copies of her references already from the RFP and already from the first time that she had visited, and now she's going to go through the same process that anyone who has never even applied for, the management will go through to do anything. So I understand it's past that point because the contract is here and because of the timelines. I'm just encouraging the city to look at how the CMPA operates, and that gets its direction from the city council people here being the leaders, saying, wait a minute. And Ms. Pratt is very often very, questioning of how the process is going. I appreciate that at times. It seems a little obstinate to some people, but I appreciate obstinance when it means good process so that there is no redressing that's necessary. There was an urgency to quickly make a decision before anyone could be considered, and I just really ask this council to push the CMPA in the future discussions and the city staff in anything they can do to try to be as inclusive of those people who honored the request that was put out. And I do realize there's a separation from the CMPA and the city, but as you just said earlier, they are considered an entity of the city. They are not. They are a separate body. But they do, by extension, reflect on us. And so that is why I'm asking you, in whatever influence you can have, to please push for inclusion.
Well, I said entity. I should have said instrument. That's actually in one of the documents. Mr. Gerald's and then Ms. Myers.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this needs to be said, but today is Thursday. We haven't even gotten to Friday, and my schedule is already full up to next Thursday. The reason I point that out is because, as I shared with the members of the community, and I do know that all of us have things to do and responsibilities and places to be. But as indicated earlier by Mr. Reynolds, that these matters can be best handled at the CMPA meeting. And what I am referring to is that the CMPA meeting as well as the EBO meeting, you would be amazed at what goes on in that room. And it's kind of difficult for Ms. Dubuisson or anyone else to try to present. I guess you have the opportunity of watching the streaming video, but to be there in person live, you would be surprised. And all I'm saying is you got to come to those meetings. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Myers.
Well, I do go to those meetings, and I've been going to those meetings for almost 7 years, and nothing surprises me. And the way that contract was railroaded through the CMPA, I was a witness to that, and had it, and the first meeting, it was a city council person who did the attempted railroad job, and had it not been for some of the longtime members of the CMPA, notably Dr. Jones, there would not have been an opportunity for other companies to do a presentation. And I was actually pretty appalled at the process myself. And that's another reason I won't support this agreement. I was there and witnessed it, and I really thank you for bringing that issue, these issues to the attention of the City Council. I have a problem with City Council members serving on the CMPA. I think it's a conflict of interest, and I know we received a memorandum of law or a letter from a law firm that was sent to Mr. Messer back in July of last year, which I don't think I saw it until recently, regarding dual office holding. The CMPA is basically what anyone wants it to be at any particular time to achieve whatever purpose whoever wants to achieve. And I think that's really unfortunate because it leads to a lot of confusion and non-transparency in government. I do think that the city council should be concerned about how that contract came to be passed or approved by the CMPA. It concerns me.
Okay. Mr. Gerald's had his light on first, but he's already spoken on this issue, so I'll go to Ms. DeWeese first.
Okay.
Did you say Ms. DeWeese?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I certainly support, I voted yes for the contract, and I support and know that the city can administer this contract, but I also asked about the process of including subcontractors, because government needs to only perform the things that citizens are either not able to do or not willing to do, and not be in competition with the private sector. I'm very concerned about the points process not being used. Again, it's probably a decision that can be made without question, but whether it was a good one or not, I was not there, and I'm hearing that it needed to happen, because when you don't use these point processes in any selection process, that means you're making an emotional, uninformed decision is what you would deduce from that. If you use the point process, that is where you can make a solid mathematical decision. So I'm not sure about the reasoning for it. I'm not calling out the CMPA for whatever reasons they did, but I do want to ensure that we have a process in place as soon as possible, because the maintenance and care and keeping of the CMP will begin very soon, and I do want to see the private sector under contract for a great deal of it. I know that we will have to hire new people. That was addressed in our other meeting about the need for new employees. So in vice new employees, let's put the private sector to work. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Geralds.
Just really briefly, I'm cognizant of the hour, but I wanted to say this because here again it needs to be said, and I don't cut corners. But when we appoint people to these boards, we have to monitor their attendance and participation. When it comes to African American representation on that board, there is one member who comes late, leaves early, and is frequently absent. That's not representation for African American people on that board, if that person, and I hope they're listening or watch the streaming video, but I mean what I say, and if you're not going to show up, then resign from the board. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Myers.
Yes, and I think all of our boards should be monitored for attendance. I think that's something that we need to discuss at the committee of the whole is board attendance. I have had complaints from board members of, for instance, the Environmental Advisory Board concerning at least one person who hasn't been to a meeting, I've been told, in 2 years. And we need to set some guidelines on attendance and performance on our boards and accountability to the city council. So I would like to see that become an agenda item for the committee of the whole.
Well, let's vote on that next committee of the whole then, to put that on there. We're in open forum now. It's almost 9 o'clock. Gary, you're the last speaker. Well, we just covered about the entire state of Florida there, didn't we?
No, we haven't.
Okay, go ahead.
We are in better shape than the rest of Florida. Thank you. Gary Sansing, 1517 East Jackson. Thank you, Dr. Pratt, for bringing up Mr. Page. I meant to bring up that in the first. Before that guy writes something, he double checks himself and sometimes triple checks himself.
Who's this?
Mr. Page.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Mr. Jeremy Page. And yet we pass things, or you people pass things not even understanding. We have to depend on, I call him Thomas Page. Because I call him that because my first hero was Thomas Paine. And you mentioned it tonight, and I'm glad you mentioned it, a can of worms. When I used to go to them meetings, I went about 3 times. They weren't meetings, they were marketing lectures. It's a waste of time to me. When you go there and you have no input to all these meetings, that's what it's going to boil down to. This can of worms is going to keep coming worse. And for starting, citizen input. I went to a bunch of them. When they're trying to tell me what to do and what's going to happen, it ain't all happened. And yet citizens had no input. They say, oh yeah. And then on the, I call it the consolidation, you had judges running each of them. And yet, again, at the subcommittees, no right to speak. What the heck? And yeah, you people are left holding the bag. And we got new staff. You were around. I was around. Now to the tree ordinance. We go back to there. When you came in, what happened then? They were cutting down a whole bunch of trees. This used to be the city of trees. I won't mention any names, but it was brought up that the city and county, you people have a better ordinance. That was about 5 or 6 years after the issue of ordinance or tree ordinance came up. You were years behind the county getting a recycle. It's like talking to that old council. It was a waste of time. You people are new. You can make a decision. You should be honored. Some of us supported you. You are the leaders that represent us. So please show some leadership. And I remember taking you out to Walden Pond.
Oh, I still remember that.
I was so wonderful.
Yeah.
Well,
it's just a wonderful haven. And
well, now you know it's again, show some leadership here. I only got a couple seconds, but give me a time. Over the weekend, most of my friends are all vets. And the big thing, we got thousands of them waiting for health care, mental, physical. Some of them are gonna need a lifetime of support. And now you got a bunch of politicians wanting us to go bomb, 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 invade here, invade there. And yet we can't take care of our own, and we're to defend the world? Hell no, we can't do it. And now we'll talk about the budget some more. I remember 5 years ago, I know time's up, but let me get this off my chest. Sitting over in a very swank place with a guy that comes in and says, you know, there's a bunch of people out here that don't know what's happening. And I said, what you speaking of? This is 5 years ago. He says, I'm here to tell some of these businessmen how to take advantage of the foreclosures that's coming.
Okay, thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Mr. Gerald.
Yeah, just a real brief.
Okay, thanks.
Just a real brief statement. On a positive note, said that you can all sleep.
I'm very positive about our city. We'll survive here.
So that you can all sleep easy this evening. I was notified earlier this week by the University of West Florida that I've been chosen to be one of their distinguished alumni. And they will congratulate me on the 31st of March. Just want to run that by you so you can all get a good night's sleep.
It's not over yet.
I was going to go congratulate John Jeff.
Okay, thank everybody for coming, and thanks for tuning in. We're adjourned.